Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. Many fans of long-running stories often ask themselves, did the author actually know how it was all going to end? The question becomes especially sharp when the finale feels lackluster or rushed, as if the threads woven throughout the tale were simply cut off. And of course, this question hasn't passed J.K. Rowling by either. But if you take the time to reread the Harry Potter series with care, you'll discover numerous subtle hints, symbols and allusions, fragments of a mirror reflecting a future not yet arrived. Today, we'll examine these hidden clues together, and perhaps you'll see this beloved story through entirely new eyes. Enjoy watching. Number 1. Snape's loyalty, the mirror that reflected the truth. In the Goblet of Fire, there's a small but incredibly revealing moment that unveils Snape's true nature long before his tragic truth is formally revealed. When Barty Crouch Jr., disguised as Moody, lures Harry away, the faux glass in his office reflects three figures approaching: Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall, and Snape. The mirror shows those the owner considers enemies, and the fact that Snape appears among them says more than an entire chapter of exposition ever could. It's a quiet but powerful omen about where Snape's true loyalties really lie. Number 2, the truth behind Voldemort's curse, pettiness with massive consequences. When Tom Riddle was denied the position of Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, he didn't just sulk, and he cursed the position itself. Ever since, no teacher has lasted more than a year. But why? Was it just revenge? If you look deeper, a darker motive emerges. Voldemort, seeking to dominate the magical world, made sure that future generations of witches and wizards would be defenseless. The Ministry is shown ordering protective gear from teenagers at Weasley's Wizard Wheezes because its own staff can't produce effective spells. This wasn't just a curse, it was a strategic move to dismantle the system from within. Number 3. Ginny's victory, Quidditch as a foreshadowing of love. To many, Harry's romantic arc felt abrupt. Why not Hermione? Why Ginny? The answer lies not just in emotions but in symbolism. In Order of the Phoenix, during the final Quidditch match between Gryffindor and Ravenclaw, Ginny, subbing in as seeker for Harry, outmaneuvers Cho Chang. In that moment, Rowling encrypts who will ultimately stand by Harry's side. Her win on the pitch becomes a metaphor for her victory in his heart. Rowling would later confirm, Ginny didn't just win the match, she won Harry's love. Number 4. The Sorting Hat, a glimpse into another soul. The Sorting Hat is one of the oldest magical artifacts in the wizarding world, and it rarely makes mistakes. Yet it seriously considered placing Harry in Slytherin, where he seemed a complete misfit. Why? Because within Harry resided a fragment of Voldemort's soul, and that is what the hat was responding to. It wasn't ambition or cunning that it sensed, but a piece of someone who embodied those traits entirely. The hat wasn't just sorting Harry out, it was trying to sort something foreign hidden within him. Number 5. The sevenfold Harry, a reflection of Voldemort's fractured soul. When the protection at the Dursleys' home ends, the Order of the Phoenix devises a clever trick: 7 Harry Potters to throw off the Death Eaters. It's a brilliant tactical move, but also a deep metaphor. Voldemort split his soul into 7 pieces out of selfishness and obsession with immortality. Harry's friends, on the other hand, agreed to become temporary copies of him out of love and loyalty. It's a mirror image of 2 philosophies, one driven by power, the other by sacrifice. Number 6. The Sword of Gryffindor, the mirror of Harry and Voldemort. This sword is more than a relic. It absorbs what makes it stronger. It absorbed basilisk venom, became a Horcrux destroyer, and stood as a symbol of resistance. It perfectly reflects Harry himself, growing stronger through every trial. Voldemort relied on powerful objects, Hufflepuff's cup, Slytherin's locket, Ravenclaw's diadem, to make himself immortal. But the Sword of Gryffindor remained beyond his reach. It couldn't be corrupted or controlled, because like Harry, its strength came from what others tried to use to destroy it. Number 7. The werewolf metaphor, Lupin and the stigma of society. Remus Lupin is one of the most tragic and noble characters in the series. He didn't choose to become a werewolf, but society chose to make him an outcast, a job that never lasts, constant fear, quiet rejection. Rowling later confirmed this was a metaphor for real-world stigma, chronic illnesses like HIV/AIDS and others that society treats with blame rather than compassion. Lupin is a mirror of a world that turns away from the vulnerable, even when they're stronger than most, and his story holds some of the most powerful symbolism in the series. Number 8. Ron's chess match. In Philosopher's Stone, the enchanted chessboard wasn't just a magical obstacle, it was a prophecy in motion. Ron, facing the giant pieces, doesn't hesitate. "I'll have to be taken," he says, and climbs onto the knight. One brutal strike later, he's unconscious, and Harry and Hermione move on without him. The moment is thrilling, yes, but also deeply symbolic. Ron sacrifices himself so others can win. That choice will define him for the rest of the series. Ron isn't the chosen one, he isn't the brightest witch of his age, but he's the friend who stays, the one who fights beside Harry at the Ministry, the one who dives into the icy lake to save him from a cursed locket. He walks away from the trio only once, and the regret nearly tears him apart. The chess match foreshadows it all. He plays the game not for glory, but to protect others. Just like McGonagall's pieces, Ron is brave because he knows he's vulnerable and still chooses to act. Even Dumbledore's long war against Voldemort mirrors that same board. He moves his pieces carefully. Sirius, Snape, Lupin, all placed in position, all risking everything. Harry, like the king, can't reach victory alone. It takes every sacrifice to clear the path. And Ron, that day on the chessboard, gave the series its first real glimpse of what heroism looks like: quiet, painful, and willing. Number 9. George Weasley's ear and the twin symbolism. In Deathly Hallows, during the escape from Privet Drive, George Weasley is struck by a curse and loses his ear. "I saint-like," Fred jokes, trying to make him laugh. "You know, holy." It's a moment of dark humour, classic for the twins, but beneath the joke is pain. George will never be whole again. At the time, it seems like just another injury in a dangerous war. But Rowling never places wounds without meaning. George's missing ear becomes a quiet foreshadowing. The twins had always been one soul in two bodies, inseparable, identical, perfectly in sync. The loss of the ear is symbolic. It's the first crack in that perfect symmetry, and it comes with a whisper of what's to come. Later in the book, Fred is killed during the Battle of Hogwarts. George, left behind, is no longer part of a pair. The ear was the warning. The death was the silence that followed. Just like Van Gogh's self-inflicted wound was tied to madness and isolation, George's injury speaks of a coming emptiness. Rowling wraps this symbol in laughter, but its weight grows with the story. After Fred's death, George lives on, but never the same. One twin with one ear, a brother missing not just a piece of himself, but the echo that once made him whole. Number 10. Thestrals, the harbingers of war. When Harry returns to Hogwarts in Order of the Phoenix, the carriages that once moved on their own are no longer empty. Now he sees them pulled by creatures with leathery wings and hollow eyes. Thestrals. "What are those things pulling the carriages?" he asks. Luna Lovegood is the only one who answers. They're called Thestrals. They can only be seen by people who've seen death. Harry has seen death now. Cedric Diggory's murder changed him. The Thestrals mark a shift in tone. The whimsical schoolboy adventures are over. From this moment, Harry walks a darker path. The world is no longer safe or simple. The presence of Thestrals is Rowling's quiet signal to the reader. Innocence has ended. The series is entering new territory. War is coming. Friends will fall. Choices will cost more. Even the way to school, once magical and light, has turned shadowed. But the Thestrals aren't evil. They're misunderstood, just like death itself. Harry learns this slowly. He touches one, rides one, trusts one. In the Ministry of Magic, Thestrals carry him and his friends into danger and into purpose. The same creatures born from loss now become his wings. Rowling shows us that grief, once faced, can give strength. Thestrals are more than creatures. They are symbols of truth, ugly, invisible to the innocent, impossible to ignore once seen. Harry cannot unsee death, but by learning to live with it, by riding it straight into battle, he becomes more than a boy. He becomes a leader. Number 11. Draco Malfoy's Wand. In Deathly Hallows, one small, quiet moment turns the fate of the entire wizarding world. At Malfoy Manor, Harry disarms Draco. No dramatic duel, no thunder or lightning, just a simple act. Draco's wand flies into Harry's hand. Later, we learn that this wand has shifted allegiance, and with that, Rowling sets the stage for the final battle, not with brute strength, but with something softer, more powerful, mercy. Voldemort never understands this. He believes the Elder Wand will obey him because he took it from Dumbledore's grave. He believes ownership is about theft, domination, conquest. But Harry, who won Draco's wand not out of cruelty but necessity, now carries a wand that chooses him. Does the wand in fact know its last master was disarmed? Voldemort sneers. The answer is yes, the wand knows, and it refuses to kill its true master. Rowling leaves us with a powerful contrast. Voldemort tears the world apart to control death. Harry spares Draco, and in doing so earns the loyalty that Voldemort could never buy. The final spell, Expelliarmus, not Avada Kedavra, defeats the Dark Lord. A disarming charm, not a killing curse. Harry's true magic isn't in his power, it's in his choices. Number 12, Aragog's death as an omen. Aragog's death in half-blood. Prince happens quietly beneath the trees, far from battles and spells. Hagrid weeps. Slughorn collects venom. Harry watches, but something else is happening just beneath the surface. Aragog wasn't just a spider. He was a piece of Hagrid's past, a piece of Harry's past too. Back in Chamber of Secrets, Aragog was terrifying, yes, but he also led Harry toward truth. In the forest, surrounded by thousands of skittering legs, Harry was still a boy chasing answers. Now, that world is gone. The burial marks a shift. The innocence of childhood, the belief that monsters can be reasoned with, that friends like Hagrid will always be there to protect you, dies with Aragog. That same night, Harry secures the memory from Slughorn, the one that reveals the secret of Horcruxes. "This is the most important memory I've collected," Dumbledore tells him. And it comes right after a funeral. That's no coincidence. From here on, everything changes. There are no more safe corners of the world. Aragog's final contribution to the story isn't venom. It's silence. The kind that falls just before everything unravels. His death signals the end of myths and the beginning of hard truths. Harry will face loss after loss. Dumbledore, Hedwig, Fred. But it starts here with a spider buried in the dark and a boy about to walk into the storm. Number 13, The Mirror of Erised and its Secret Meaning. The Mirror of Erised appears in the first book like a gentle dream. Harry stumbles upon it alone, tucked away in a forgotten classroom. In its surface, he sees not glory or power, but something far more human, his parents, standing beside him smiling. "I didn't know it would show me my family," he tells Dumbledore. And the headmaster replies with quiet gravity. "It shows us nothing more or less than the deepest, most desperate desire of our hearts." But then comes the warning. Many men have wasted away before it, lost in what might have been. At 11 years old, Harry is drawn to the mirror's promise of love and belonging. He returns night after night, mesmerized. But Dumbledore knows the danger. He moves the mirror, not just to protect Harry, but to guide him. It's one of the earliest lessons in the series, that clinging to dreams can be as dangerous as facing nightmares. As the books unfold, we see Harry face loss after loss, Sirius, Dumbledore, Dobby, and yet he never again seeks comfort in illusions. The mirror taught him how to mourn and how to let go. By the time he reaches the Forbidden Forest in Deathly Hallows, ready to give his life to defeat Voldemort, Harry no longer chases shadows. He walks into death with eyes open. He does not beg for escape or search for what he cannot have. When he uses the Resurrection Stone, he doesn't cling to the ghosts of his past. He lets them walk beside him, then fade. He does what the boy in front of the mirror could not. He chooses reality over desire. The mirror of Erised vanishes after the first book, but its lesson lingers. Rowling didn't bring it back because Harry no longer needed it. That moment in the dusty classroom was the beginning of his transformation, from a boy who wanted to be loved to a man who loved enough to sacrifice everything. The mirror was never just a magical object, it was a test, and Harry passed it the moment he stopped looking into it. Number 14, Arthur Weasley's fascination with Muggle things. Arthur Weasley's fascination with Muggle objects is often played for laughs. He asks Harry, wide-eyed, what exactly is the function of a rubber duck, and marvels at the simplest household gadgets as if they're enchanted artifacts. At first glance, this obsession makes him look eccentric, just another lovable oddball in the sea of quirky witches and wizards. But if we look closer, we see something far more important. Arthur Weasley is one of the few magical people who truly believes the Muggle world has something valuable to offer. Unlike most pure-blood wizards, Arthur doesn't scoff at Muggle inventions. He studies them, dissects them, collects batteries like precious stones. When he enchants a Ford Anglia to fly, it isn't just mischief, it's vision. He dares to blend magic and mechanics. This small rebellion against tradition foreshadows a world where the two realms may one day work side by side. The misuse of Muggle artifacts office may be a joke to others, but to Arthur it's a calling, a quiet revolution. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, we finally see how vital this bridge between worlds becomes. As Voldemort rises and the Ministry falls, it's not wands that bring news to the underground resistance. It's Potter Watch, a radio broadcast cobbled together with Muggle tech. Lee Jordan, Kingsley Shacklebolt, and even Lupin speak to the hidden wizarding world through static and signal, not spells. Technology becomes a lifeline. What Arthur once explored for fun now saves lives. J.K. Rowling later revealed that magical society would slowly begin to embrace Muggle inventions. This isn't just world-building trivia. It validates Arthur Weasley's role as a quiet visionary. He wasn't playing with plugs, he was preparing for the future. While others clung to outdated hierarchies, Arthur collected clues from the world next door. In his cluttered shed surrounded by wires and rubber ducks, he was building the future of wizardkind. Number 15. The hidden message in Dumbledore's name. Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. The name rolls off the tongue with a certain gravity, an orchestral melody of ancient roots and cryptic meaning. To the inattentive reader, it may appear unnecessarily flamboyant, a ceremonial collection of syllables meant to embellish the already mythical aura of the Hogwarts headmaster. But for those who dare to look closer, for those who listen to the subtle rhythm of Rowling's world-building, this name is a cipher. It is not merely a name, but a map, a legend carved in letters, a whisper from the author herself, telling us who Albus truly is before we fully understand him. Albus, Latin for white. The choice was deliberate, almost pristine in its clarity. In a world of shadows and secrets, of muddied loyalties and moral compromises, Dumbledore was introduced to readers as the embodiment of light. From the very first pages of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, when he arrives on Privet Drive wearing long robes and a cloak that swept the ground, there's an ethereal air about him. White not only denotes purity, but knowledge, illumination, wisdom, the qualities Rowling encoded into the very first word of his name. In alchemy and symbolism, white is the color of the Philosopher's Stone before its perfection, the base for transformation. Dumbledore, in many ways, was the stone of Hogwarts, ancient, wise, and secretly burdened with his own imperfection. The second name, Percival, is far from random. It is a direct echo from Arthurian legend evoking the tale of Sir Percival, one of the knights who sought the Holy Grail. The Grail in myth is not just a relic, it is truth, it is enlightenment, it is the end of suffering and the beginning of understanding. Dumbledore, much like his namesake, is engaged in a lifelong quest, not for eternal youth or riches, but for redemption, for answers to the deepest moral questions, for the resolution of guilt. His pursuit of the Deathly Hallows mirrors the perilous journey of Percival through forests of illusion and temptation. When he tells Harry in the Deathly Hallows, "Do not pity the dead, Harry, pity the living, and above all those who live without love," we hear the voice of a man who has tasted despair and yet still seeks the light. Wulfric adds a tone of ferocity, a reminder that gentleness and strength are not mutually exclusive. The name is of Anglo-Saxon origin, meaning wolf power or wolf ruler. The wolf, an animal steeped in both menace and loyalty, suggests leadership through both fear and respect. While Dumbledore rarely exerts force, when he does, it is devastating. In the Order of the Phoenix, when he confronts Voldemort in the Ministry of Magic, his power is described as ancient and commanding. Dumbledore's eyes flashed, his long, white beard whipped around as though in a high wind, and he began to duel with a skill and strength that none had anticipated. Wulfric lives in those moments, the hidden fire behind the gentle smile. Then comes Brian. A name so ordinary, so drably British, that it seems almost like a joke, a grounding force amid the mythic tones of the others. But that's the brilliance of it. Rowling tucks humility right into the heart of the character. Brian reminds us that Dumbledore is not a god. He is human, flawed, painfully so. He once believed in wizarding supremacy, fell prey to the dreams of a boy named Gellert Grindelwald, and was responsible for the death of his sister. "I was not to be trusted with power," he confesses in the Deathly Hallows. It is a curious thing, Harry, but perhaps those who are best suited to power are those who have never sought it. Brian is the echo of the man who has learned that lesson. Each name, then, is not an embellishment. It is a verse in a spell, a layer of identity woven into the character. Albus, light; Percival, the quest; Wulfric, strength; Brian, humility. Dumbledore is the amalgam of all these forces, and Rowling invites the reader to unravel this tapestry one thread at a time. Even his surname is charged with meaning. Dumbledore being an Old English word for bumblebee, chosen because Rowling imagined him humming to himself around the castle. But bees, too, are deeply symbolic. They are creatures of community, tireless workers, guardians of hidden sweetness. They are humble, yet dangerous when provoked. Dumbledore, like the bee, toils in silence, building something greater than himself. Consider how his name foreshadows his role in Harry's life. He is the mentor, the guide, but not a savior. He is the architect of resistance, yet not without cost. His full name serves as a prophecy in itself, whispering that he is more than a headmaster. He is the embodiment of a path, a journey of error, knowledge, and atonement. When we learn, in The Half-Blood Prince, of Dumbledore's cursed hand, blackened and shriveled, the price of possessing the resurrection stone, we see a man who bears the weight of his own ambition. The curse is not just magical, it is moral. The name Percival also binds him to his father, Percival Dumbledore, who was imprisoned for attacking Muggle boys who harmed Ariana. There is irony and tragedy in the connection. The son carries the name of the father, and with it the burden of history. But while the elder Percival's path was marked by vengeance, Albus's is carved through penance. This duality again affirms that the name is not decorative, it is a legacy. Wulfric surfaces subtly, too, in the way others react to Dumbledore's presence. Cornelius Fudge, in The Goblet of Fire, hesitates before challenging him. Kingsley Shacklebolt describes him as the only one you-know-who ever feared. This reputation is not built on political manoeuvring, but on raw, undeniable power, restrained but ready. The wolf in Wulfric is caged but never forgotten. Brian grounds all this. Without it, Dumbledore might drift into archetype, but Rowling roots him in the everyday. It is Brian who listens to chamber music, Brian who delights in sherbet lemons, Brian who confesses his failures in the King's Cross chapter. "I cared more for your happiness than your knowing the truth," he tells Harry. "More for your peace than your plan. More for your life than the lives that might be lost if the plan failed." These are not the words of a flawless sage, but of a man named Brian, real, regretful, and loving. Number 16, Hermione and her dragon heart. It was a small moment, easily lost among the whirlwind of adventure and discovery in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. The trio, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, were caught sneaking out of bed after hours. In a flurry of panic, as they narrowly escaped the grasp of Filch and his cat, Mrs. Norris, Hermione did something seemingly comical. She threw A History of Magic by Professor Binns out the window. The gesture seemed absurd, even humorous, a rare moment of recklessness from Hogwarts' most rule-abiding student. Yet, for those willing to look deeper, that flying book was not just paper and ink caught in a gust of wind. It was a spark, a symbol, a quiet but defiant whisper that the girl who revered books and rules might one day turn against the very system those books upheld. From the start, Hermione was framed as the archetype of the perfect student, brilliant, disciplined, and intensely loyal to the structure of magical education. She memorized spells before even arriving at Hogwarts and took pride in knowing every school rule by heart. She was mocked by others for her know-it-all tendencies, and even Ron, who would become one of her closest friends, found her insufferable at first. But the image of Hermione as merely a teacher's pet was never the full truth. Rowling gave us early warnings, one of the first being that tossed book. "I hope you're pleased with yourselves. We could all have been killed, or worse, expelled." Hermione's famous line from the first book made her a meme in the eyes of many fans. But the moment she let go of A History of Magic, quite literally, Rowling hinted at an evolution already brewing inside her. The book, authored by a ghost who bored generations of students into numbness, stood for a rigid, outdated understanding of history. Professor Binns himself was an embodiment of the system, lifeless, disengaged, and unwilling to change. Hermione, by discarding his work, committed her first act of academic rebellion. This act wasn't impulsive, it was deliberate. It wasn't a rejection of knowledge, it was a rejection of passive learning. Hermione wasn't just carrying books, she was already beginning to question which voices deserved to be heard. Professor Binns, for all his authority, never spoke of the darker, messier parts of magical history. He didn't question the narratives, didn't challenge systemic oppression, and certainly didn't address injustice in the magical world. Throwing away his textbook symbolized Hermione's unspoken refusal to accept history as it was taught, a refusal that would eventually define her future. By the time we reach Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Hermione's transformation is impossible to ignore. In one of the most painful decisions any character makes throughout the series, she obliterates her own identity in the Muggle world. She had used a complex spell to make her parents forget that they had a daughter, gave them new identities, and sent them to Australia. This wasn't just a protective measure, it was an erasure, a voluntary death of her past life. Hermione Granger, once so desperate for order and structure, had become someone who would destroy everything she held dear to fight a war she knew might never end. And it was a war not just against Voldemort, but against the structures that allowed his ideology to take root. Hermione's fight went far beyond defeating a dark wizard. In the Goblet of Fire, her founding of SPEW, the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, was laughed off by students and fans alike. But Rowling wasn't joking. Through Hermione, she introduced the concept of magical social justice. House elves, loyal and mistreated for centuries, were never granted proper rights, their servitude normalized by wizards. Dobby's freedom in the second book was treated as an exception, not a rule. Hermione saw this for what it was, systemic oppression rooted in tradition. It was this dragon heart, this burning sense of justice, that defined Hermione more than her intellect. The term Dragonheart comes not from a literal association with dragons, but from the symbolism Rowling uses throughout the series. Dragons are creatures of power, danger, and freedom. They are feared by wizards not just for their strength, but for their inability to be tamed. Hermione was becoming one of them. Brilliant, yes. Brave, yes, but also untamable. Rowling herself once described Hermione as the voice of logic, but logic does not exclude emotion or morality. It amplifies it. Hermione's evolution wasn't a departure from reason, it was a fuller embrace of it. The rational mind does not blindly follow rules, it evaluates them, it questions. Hermione's character arc shows us how a true intellectual must be willing to unlearn, challenge, and even destroy the institutions that no longer serve the truth. Her confrontation with Dolores Umbridge in Order of the Phoenix is a clear example. Umbridge, the epitome of governmental cruelty disguised as policy, enforced censorship, surveillance, and punishment under the guise of educational reform. Hermione saw through the pink cardigans and polite speech. While others hesitated, Hermione acted. She helped found Dumbledore's army, she trained students in real-world defense, and she openly defied the Ministry of Magic at its most authoritarian. She did not break the rules for fun, she did it because those rules protected the oppressors. Even her treatment of Professor Trelawney reveals growth. While Hermione initially rejected divination as nonsense, a subject without structure or scientific rigor, she later recognized the humanity of Trelawney when Umbridge tried to sack her. Hermione, who had walked out of Trelawney's class in disgust, stood quietly beside her as she wept in the courtyard. Her worldview had expanded, compassion had found its place alongside reason. Another moment often overlooked is Hermione's role in freeing Griphook and breaking into Gringotts. She transformed into Bellatrix Lestrange using Polyjuice Potion, a chilling disguise that required her to embrace not only deception, but fear. She navigated a world of violence and ambiguity, all while holding tight to her sense of right and wrong. No longer a schoolgirl memorizing spells, she was now a revolutionary. Strategic, ruthless when necessary, but never cruel. Number 17, Hedwig, more than a pet. From the moment Harry Potter entered the world of magic, a white, snowy owl soared into his life, sharp-eyed, silent, and untamed. Her name was Hedwig. Gifted to him by Hagrid in Diagon Alley during his very first trip into the wizarding world, Hedwig was more than a pet. She became a quiet, graceful companion, an embodiment of the awe and wonder that consumed Harry's early days at Hogwarts. Her death in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, swift and brutal, left readers heartbroken. But there was more at play than tragedy. Hedwig's end was a signal, one that many missed. It marked a rupture, a deliberate cutting of the final thread between Harry and his childhood. Joanne Rowling never wasted a character, never used a symbol without intention. Hedwig, with her luminous feathers and piercing gaze, had always stood for something sacred in Harry's world. She was his first real gift, the first thing he ever owned that was truly his. Not hand-me-downs, not cast-offs, not scraps. She was beautiful and proud and utterly magical. In The Sorcerer's Stone, Rowling writes, the snowy owl swooped in through the open window and landed on Harry's shoulder, nipping his ear affectionately. In that small moment, she conveyed safety, continuity, and affection. Hedwig wasn't just delivering post, she was carrying pieces of home, stability, and identity. When Harry was locked in his cupboard under the stairs or confined in his bedroom with bars on the window, Hedwig was often his only companion. Her soft hoots were a balm in a house filled with cold silence or Dursley shouts. She was a lifeline to the world that acknowledged who he really was. She brought news from friends, parchment that smelled of Hogwarts, parchment that said, "You matter." With each letter she delivered, she became a symbol of his belonging. But as the series grew darker and more perilous, so too did Hedwig's presence change. In Order of the Phoenix, for instance, her injury at the hands of Umbridge's ministry-controlled interference foreshadowed the coming corruption. Her return with a bleeding wing was unsettling, and it echoed the increasing threats even familiar comforts now faced. Hedwig was no longer safe. Neither was Harry. The world was shifting. By the time the Deathly Hallows opens, Rowling wastes no time in unspooling the inevitable. The very first mission, the Seven Potters' escape plan, is laced with risk. As the group soars through the sky on brooms and Thestrals, chased by Death Eaters, Harry clutches his faithful owl in the cage. She is agitated, sensing danger, and then, in one breathless instant, she is struck. The owl screeched and fell to the bottom of the cage. "Hedwig!" Harry shouted, but she was motionless. That is all. A flash of green, and it's over. Hedwig is gone. Rowling chose to kill Hedwig early in the book, not by accident, but by narrative design. It was a literary incision meant to wound both character and reader. Harry screams her name, but there is no time for grief. The sky is burning. The war has begun. In that moment, Rowling is drawing a line in the sand. The Harry we knew, the boy who once clutched an acceptance letter and marvelled at chocolate frogs, is dying too. Hedwig's death is not just an emotional blow, it is a thematic severing. She represented Harry's innocence, creature of light. She mirrored his unbroken trust in goodness. In losing her, Harry loses the final untainted connection to the boy he once was. And what's more, Hedwig doesn't die passively, she dies protecting him. In the deluxe edition interview, Rowling later confirmed this intention. The loss of Hedwig represented a loss of innocence and security. The sacrifice she made in saving Harry was deliberate. It marked the end of childhood. It's a detail readers often gloss over in the chaos of that night, but Rowling subtly gives Hedwig a hero's death. She flies from her cage. She places herself between Harry and the killing curse. It's a final act of agency, one last moment of defiance from a creature who was always more than ornamental. She shields him from death. For a bird who cannot speak, it is a clear and powerful statement. The symbolic loss isn't new in literature. Animals have long stood in for the untouchable parts of a character's soul. In his Dark Materials, Pullman uses demons. In To Kill a Mockingbird, the mockingbird itself. Rowling threads this ancient tradition with precision. Hedwig was not magical in the spellcasting sense. She did not talk, did not change form, but her presence altered the emotional gravity of every scene she was in. With her gone, that warmth evaporated. Every page thereafter carries the weight of her absence. Following her death, there is a notable shift in Harry's behavior. He becomes more guarded, more cynical, more willing to act ruthlessly. When he buries Mad-Eye Moody's eye at the Ministry or fights back against Lupin's criticism, we see a Harry unafraid to confront adults, to question old loyalties. The death of his owl didn't just make him angrier, it made him freer. He is no longer the student, he is the soldier. In Goblet of Fire, Hedwig is described in one scene as sitting bolt upright, a little reproachful, as though judging the contents of the letter she was about to deliver. This line, though playful, evokes her moral role in Harry's life. She stood watch. She disapproved when he was neglectful or dishonest. She was a creature of truth and clarity, pure in her loyalty. In killing her off, Rowling was removing that external conscience. Now Harry must rely solely on himself. Another often overlooked detail is that after Hedwig's death, Harry never bonds with another owl. He doesn't seek a replacement. Even when opportunities arise, he lets them pass. This is not merely practicality, it is mourning. He knows no other owl could carry what she did. There is no new Hedwig. That part of him is closed. The message is unspoken but potent. You don't move on from a soul like that. Number 18, Magic Mirrors, hints through reflection. In the cold, echoing chamber of Hogwarts, hidden deep behind the third-floor corridor's forbidden door, stands an object that would become one of the most symbolically potent artifacts in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the Mirror of Erised. It is not merely a relic. It is a test, a trap, and a truth-teller, all in one. When Harry Potter first discovers it, he sees not just his own reflection, but something deeper, his parents, James and Lily, smiling at him with love he had never known. Rowling did not place this mirror in the story as a magical curiosity. It was a deliberate insertion of theme, foreshadowing, and emotion. She gave Harry a glimpse of something irretrievable, and through that reflection, we, the readers, glimpsed Rowling's grander motif, that mirrors in the wizarding world are never passive. The inscription carved around the mirror's frame, Erised stra eru oit ube kafru oit on voxi, is simple when read backward. I show not your face, but your heart's desire. But this is no hollow metaphor. Harry is entranced, addicted even, to this illusion. For many nights he sneaks back under his invisibility cloak just to see his parents, to bathe in the warmth of a dream. Yet it is Dumbledore who coldly and wisely warns. It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live. Here, Rowling introduces her thesis. A mirror may reveal truth, but it is truth tinted with longing. Mirrors, for her, are emotional gateways, not just tools of sight. What makes this detail all the more striking is that the mirror never speaks, it does not move, it does not cast spells, and yet it becomes one of the most hauntingly human things in the entire castle. Unlike the moving portraits or enchanted artifacts, it simply reflects. But what it reflects is transformative. For Harry, the mirror becomes an emotional portal, not just to a past he never knew, but to a yearning so deep it almost overwhelms him. Rowling was subtle here. She never described the glass as magical in the sense of casting enchantments. Its magic was internal, on Harry's side, not the mirror's. Years later, in Order of the Phoenix, a different mirror appears, but it too carries with it the same haunting undertone, the promise of connection. Sirius Black gives Harry a piece of a two-way mirror once used by Sirius and James Potter to communicate when they were young. Sirius says, "If you need me, just speak into this." And yet this mirror is tossed into a trunk, forgotten until it is too late. It lies buried in the weight of Harry's indecision, only to resurface after Sirius has fallen behind the veil in the Department of Mysteries. Once more, the mirror shows not the face of the living, but the echo of someone gone. The tragedy of Sirius's death is made even more poignant by the mirror's role. It is not simply a missed opportunity, it is symbolic of a truth Harry could not yet face. Had he used the mirror, he could have confirmed Sirius's location, avoided the trap set by Voldemort, and perhaps even prevented the death of the only father figure he had ever known. Rowling does not shout this irony. She lets it bleed quietly through the pages, and when Harry looks into the shard, hoping, aching to see Sirius, all he sees is his own reflection. Again, Rowling reminds us, mirrors are not always truthful. Sometimes they only reflect what we are willing to confront. By the time we reach the final books, the motif of mirrors is no longer symbolic alone. It becomes almost spiritual. In Deathly Hallows, Harry receives a broken shard of the same two-way mirror, and it becomes a totem, a piece of something he both lost and failed to understand. Throughout his journey, he keeps the fragment with him, sometimes seeing a bright blue eye in it, an eye he believes to be Dumbledore's. It is not until the end that we learn the eye belongs to Aberforth Dumbledore, Albus's estranged brother, who had kept the other half of the mirror. But the symbolism remains intact. Through the broken mirror, Harry sees not Dumbledore, but the possibility of redemption. The fractured mirror represents more than a link between characters. It becomes a visual metaphor for Harry himself, broken by grief, shattered by war, but still capable of seeing light through the cracks. Aberforth's face, when revealed, is a reflection of the pain Harry has endured, as well as the pain Albus once caused his own family. Rowling does not merely use mirrors as magical tools, she uses them to reflect emotional legacy. The eye in the shard is not an answer, it is a question, a presence, a call to believe in the unseen. Even the pensieve, while not technically a mirror, functions as one in Rowling's literary language. When Harry leans over its silvery surface, he is not seeing present reflections, but memories, reflected thoughts. The pensieve becomes a mirror of the mind. In Half-Blood Prince, when Harry watches Snape's worst memory, the moment when James bullies him and Lily intervenes, we see how distorted perceptions can be. What Harry sees isn't just truth, it's a version of truth refracted through emotion. Once again, Rowling uses the act of reflection to show that understanding requires sacrifice. The mirror of Erised, the two-way mirror, the pensieve, all different, all technically magical, but all functioning as windows into Rowling's greater truth, the reality of grief and the distortion of desire. Each time Harry peers into one of these reflective surfaces, he emerges changed. It is not the magic that alters him, it is the act of looking and accepting what he sees. Rowling crafts each moment carefully. She gives Harry the tools, but the realization must come from within him. Mirrors, then, are not passive reflections. They are catalysts, and in Rowling's world they are also warnings. When Dumbledore hides the Philosopher's Stone within the mirror of Erised, he does so with a spell that only reveals it to someone who wants the stone, but not to use it. This subtle moral test underscores a larger truth. Desire clouds clarity. Only those who can see through their own longing can receive true understanding. Rowling makes the mirror a judge, not just of character, but of the soul. There is an eeriness to Rowling's mirrors. They are always quiet, always present, always slightly beyond comprehension. They do not speak, but they remember. They are never the focus of the plot, yet they leave emotional echoes that shape it. The reflection of Harry's parents, the silent eye in the shard, the memories swirling in the pensieve, each is a mirror of the self. And each demands something from Harry, the courage to see beyond what is comforting. In this light, even the mirror of Erised's removal from Hogwarts is symbolic. Dumbledore states that it will be moved to a new location, away from young eyes, but we know it has not vanished. It lingers, just as memories and regrets linger. The mirrors in Rowling's world are never truly gone. They are just waiting for the moment we dare to look again. There's another layer in Rowling's craft, the idea that reflection is not always voluntary. In Chamber of Secrets, Tom Riddle's diary functions almost like a dark mirror, showing Harry a vision of the past, but filtered through Riddle's manipulation. Once more, the idea resurfaces. What we see is not always the whole truth. Rowling builds her world on this tension between sight and insight. Mirrors may reveal, but interpretation remains the burden of the beholder. The fact that these magical mirrors are often associated with loss is telling. Each mirror appears during a time of grief or longing, after the death of Harry's parents, during Sirius's dangerous missions, after Dumbledore's fall. The mirrors become vessels of mourning. They hold echoes, not futures, and yet they also offer something deeply human, the chance to look again, one more time, even if it is only at a reflection. In a subtle parallel, the Resurrection Stone, one of the Deathly Hallows, mirrors this function. Though not a literal mirror, it reflects the same yearning, the desire to see the dead. When Harry uses it in the forest, the ghosts of his loved ones appear, not as they were, but as they are in his mind, calm, supportive, eternal. Rowling blurs the line between vision and reflection once again. The mirror is no longer glass, it is memory. What is brilliant about Rowling's symbolism is that she never explains it. She never tells the reader what the mirrors mean. She lets us feel it, sense it, absorb it through narrative. This is not accidental, it's literary craftsmanship. The mirrors are emotional anchors in the text, silent, still, but vibrating with significance. They are pieces of a world where magic is not just spectacle, but symbol. In Harry's final walk through the Forbidden Forest, as he nears Voldemort, carrying no wand, only the shard of the mirror and the Resurrection Stone, we see the culmination of everything the mirrors have taught him. He no longer needs illusions, he no longer hides behind desire. He has accepted reality, the hardest truth of all. And the mirror, though broken, still shows him a path. Aberforth sees him, understands him, aids him. Reflection leads to resolution. What Rowling does through these magical mirrors is invite the reader into a quiet form of magic, one that does not rely on spells or spectacle, but on emotion and insight. The greatest truths in the series are not shouted. They are whispered through glass, seen in silence, and revealed in what lies behind the reflection. The magic is not in the mirror, it is in the one who looks. This, perhaps, is Rowling's greatest hidden clue, that all along the mirrors weren't just for Harry, they were for us, to look into them to see our own desires, our own regrets, and to ask the same question, can we face what's reflected back at us? Number 19. McGonagall's dance, a moment before darkness. It is a moment so brief that many readers might skim past it, barely noticing. Yet those few seconds, nestled quietly within the pages of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, carry a depth of symbolism that only reveals itself upon closer inspection. Albus Dumbledore, the greatest wizard of his age, turns to Minerva McGonagall, his loyal deputy headmistress, and proposes a dance. It is an odd gesture, playful, out of character, and entirely unexpected within the darkening tone of the novel. But it is also something more. It is a farewell in disguise, a coded message, a subtle foreshadowing from J.K. Rowling, whose hand never moves without purpose. The moment unfolds in the entrance hall of Hogwarts. Dumbledore, freshly returned from a secret mission with Harry, speaks lightly to McGonagall. He jokes about doing a little dance. It's silly. It makes McGonagall snort. Harry is caught off guard by the suddenness of it. The air is still thick with danger, yet Dumbledore allows himself that flicker of levity. It doesn't seem to fit until you consider the larger tapestry. The moment, seemingly inconsequential, is a bead of light before the darkness. At its core, this dance that never happens is not about steps or rhythm. It is about humanity. Dumbledore, whose life is a series of strategic burdens and moral dilemmas, offers a gesture that is purely human, unburdened by politics or war. It is a spontaneous, warm offering to a colleague he respects deeply. There is laughter, a brief shared levity between two people who have borne the weight of the wizarding world on their shoulders, and in that moment Rowling shows us something essential. Even the greatest among us crave the most human connections before the end. It is easy to overlook because Dumbledore does not die in this chapter. He is not yet dangling from the astronomy tower. He is not yet falling through the night air with a silver flash. But in this scene, he knows. He has drunk the poison. He has seen the Horcrux. He has made the unbreakable plan with Severus Snape. He is, for all intents and purposes, a man walking toward death. And he knows it. The dance is not just a joke. It is a choice to smile in the face of the abyss. When Dumbledore jokes, "I think I could do with a little more exercise," the line lands like a feather. But it is heavy. He is trembling from the after effects of the potion that ravaged his body in the cave. His hand is blackened from the Horcrux's curse. He is physically fading, even if he hides it behind smiles and twinkling eyes. The dance becomes a veiled declaration. I am still here. I am still alive, if only for a little while longer. Minerva McGonagall, ever composed, reacts with her usual crispness, but there is a flicker of warmth. She does not dance, they do not waltz across the floor, but that is not the point. The suggestion itself is the gesture. In refusing, she accepts the invitation. It is a moment of mutual understanding, unspoken but deeply felt. Rowling uses the brevity of the scene to layer meaning so that they remain hidden until later chapters reframe the moment entirely. Rowling is a master of contrast, and nowhere is this contrast more poignant than in the juxtaposition between this almost dance and the horrors that follow. Within hours, Dumbledore is dead. The symbol of hope is extinguished. The school, once a place of light, becomes a battlefield. But just before the shadow swallows it whole, there is light. There is this moment. The almost dance is like a candle held up before a storm. This is not the first time Dumbledore chooses whimsy as armor. Throughout the series, his eccentricities, his love of knitting patterns, his absurd passwords, his candy obsessions, are not quirks without substance. They are shields. They are small rebellions against the overwhelming weight of his knowledge. In the moment he suggests dancing, he is doing what he has always done, inserting joy where it should not fit. It is his way of saying, I will not go quietly. Rowling's ability to plant such seeds throughout the narrative is what makes her storytelling so layered. What seems like comic relief becomes elegy. The moment becomes a photograph of peace before war. It mirrors another scene from earlier books, the moment before Cedric Diggory's death, when everything still seems possible. These moments always carry a particular chill in hindsight, a quiet sense of tragedy made only more painful because of their softness. Symbolically, the dance is also about life. Dancing is movement, celebration, connection. It is the essence of living. And in suggesting it, Dumbledore is asserting that life still has beauty, even as it slips through his fingers. His death is already sealed, but in the time he has left, he chooses grace. He chooses to acknowledge the moment with McGonagall, not as a colleague in war, but as a fellow human being. McGonagall's reaction, half amused, half bewildered, is telling. She is a woman of structure, discipline, and pride. But in Dumbledore's final hours, she allows a crack in the mask. She does not ask questions. She does not pry. She allows him this strange farewell. Their connection, forged through decades of shared purpose, does not need explanation. Rowling gives us this without words, in The Dance That Isn't. If you trace the structure of Half-Blood Prince, this scene becomes even more pronounced. It stands at the edge of a tonal cliff. What follows is betrayal, loss, and irreversible change. The narrative shifts dramatically. After the Astronomy Tower, Hogwarts is never the same. Harry is never the same. But the entrance hall remains, echoing with a joke about dancing. It is a memory of stillness before the plunge. In many ways, this moment mirrors the idea of a Last Supper. It is the final comfort before sacrifice. Dumbledore, like Christ in the garden, knows what is coming. He does not fight it. He walks into it with open eyes, choosing not to rage, but to offer one last laugh. It is not escapism, it is courage. It is the courage to remain gentle in the face of cruelty. It also reveals something about McGonagall. Her role in the books is often one of stern guidance and sharp discipline, but here she is allowed to be part of something warmer. She is more than just a professor or a deputy. She is Dumbledore's friend. She is someone worthy of being chosen for this final gesture. Rowling uses this to remind us that even the strongest pillars of Hogwarts are not made of stone. They feel, they grieve, they love. This small moment also reminds us how tragedy rarely announces itself. The most devastating events often follow ordinary hours. Dumbledore does not leave with fanfare. He leaves with a smile, a joke, and a twinkle in his eye. He leaves with a suggestion to dance. And so Rowling gently teaches us that life must be lived fully, right up to its edge. In later books, McGonagall's grief is quiet. She does not collapse, she does not cry in public, but there is a new sharpness in her voice, a kind of hollow steadiness. When she leads the defense of Hogwarts in the final book, there is a line that reveals everything. Hogwarts is threatened. Man the boundaries, protect us, do your duty to our school. She has become the guardian. Dumbledore once was. The dance has ended. The music has stopped. But she carries the rhythm forward. The dance that wasn't also reflects one of Rowling's recurring motifs, the fleetingness of life. The books are full of these moments, Sirius laughing before falling through the veil, Fred cracking a joke before the explosion, Remus and Tonks reaching for each other before death finds them. These brief glimpses of light serve to make the loss more unbearable, but also more real. Rowling doesn't allow death to come in isolation. She lets it steal from joy. That is why the dance is so haunting, because it is not a dance, because it could have been, because it almost was, and because the fact that it wasn't makes it all the more memorable. Rowling plays with silence as much as sound. What she does not show is often more powerful than what she does. In not describing a waltz, she lets us imagine one, and in imagining it, we mourn it. The scene is also a kind of pact between reader and character. Rowling invites us to be the third person in that entrance hall, to stand with Dumbledore and McGonagall in that sliver of peace, to feel the humour, the awkwardness, and the impending doom. It is an invitation to understand the fragility of time and the way laughter can exist even within sorrow. Years after reading the series, fans return to this moment with a different set of eyes. It becomes a touchstone, a memory, an echo of what was lost. It reminds us that even within fantasy, the most powerful moments are the most human. A dance, a joke, a shared glance. These are the things that linger long after the magic fades. Rowling wrote many dramatic goodbyes in her series, some filled with action, some with tragedy. But Dumbledore's farewell was cloaked in simplicity. There were no speeches, no warnings, just a suggestion to dance, spoken softly in a hallway bathed in candlelight. That is why it endures. That is why it matters. For those who search for meaning in literature, this scene is a perfect reminder that not all truth is loud. Some truths whisper, some truths twirl once and vanish. And in that silence, we are left holding a memory, turning it over and over in our minds like a wand between fingers, a dance, a farewell, a moment of grace in a story marked by war. Number 20, Luna Lovegood, the prophet no one listens to. Of all the characters in the Harry Potter universe, none are quite like Luna Lovegood. With her radish earrings, dreamy voice, and unshakable belief in creatures like Raxperts and Nargles, Luna has often been dismissed as little more than comic relief. Yet, in the quiet spaces of the narrative, where truth tends to whisper rather than shout, Luna emerges as something far more complex. A prophet. A seer not of visions but of human souls. And like many prophets before her, Luna is largely ignored, mocked, and misunderstood. Yet time and again she proves to be startlingly right, not just in facts, but in the truths that reside beneath them. The first and most chilling sign of Luna's prophetic gift comes in order of the Phoenix. As Dumbledore's army gathers in the Room of Requirement, Luna stands among the crowd, not to blend in, but to simply be. She speaks of things others don't, of Thestrals, of death, of the veil in the Department of Mysteries. They were there, she tells Harry, after Sirius dies. They were just lurking out of sight, that's all. You heard them. It's not just comfort. Luna's words hold weight, drawing from her own knowledge and pain. She has seen death. She has embraced its reality. She speaks to Harry not as someone trying to solve his grief, but as someone who understands it. Luna understands what others refuse to confront. Before Sirius falls behind the veil, Luna hints at it. She's not a Trelawney-like figure making grand declarations, but her entire demeanor shifts when the topic of death arises. She tells Harry about the Thestrals, sensing he is finally able to see them. It's not a revelation that needs drama. Luna's style is gentle, unassuming, and yet her insight cuts to the core. You're just as sane as I am. A seemingly strange phrase, but in context, it holds a deep truth. Luna acknowledges Harry's ability to see what others cannot. She invites him into her world, not of delusion, but of vision. The books are filled with characters pretending. Ron masks his insecurities with jokes. Hermione hides her emotions behind rules. Harry often acts stronger than he feels, but Luna never pretends. She says what she feels, believes what she says, and doesn't shrink from ridicule. When Harry is isolated after Voldemort's return, even his closest friends sometimes don't know how to reach him. Luna, on the other hand, simply joins him. She doesn't push or question, she just exists beside him. There is a power in that presence, a quiet, spiritual companionship that speaks louder than declarations of loyalty. It is Luna who first comforts Harry in Half-Blood Prince, after Draco humiliates him on the train. She finds him petrified and invisible under his cloak and brings him back to safety. It's not just an act of rescue, it's a moment of deep emotional understanding. She doesn't gloat, doesn't act surprised, doesn't ask unnecessary questions. Luna recognizes vulnerability and meets it with grace. I enjoyed the meetings too, she says. About Dumbledore's army, it was like having friends. She says it so plainly, but the line echoes with loneliness and acceptance. Luna doesn't crave attention, she craves truth and connection. There's an ancient theme in storytelling, the fool who is wiser than the king. Shakespeare used it in King Lear. Rowling uses it with Luna. She is dismissed, especially by characters like Hermione, who prides herself on logic and facts. Yet it is Luna who speaks of deeper forces, love, death, hope, with more clarity than any professor. She believes in things no one can see, and yet her belief always aligns with the emotional truth of the moment. Her eccentricities are not signs of madness, but of vision. She lives in a world that others don't perceive because they're too afraid to look. During the battle of the Department of Mysteries, it is Luna who remains calm when chaos erupts. While others shout and scatter, Luna fights with clarity and resolve. She doesn't panic, she doesn't retreat. She accepts the situation with eerie composure. And when Sirius dies, she is one of the few who can speak of it without distortion. "It's not like I'll never see Mum again, is it?" she tells Harry. "You heard them, just beyond the veil." She doesn't offer empty words. She offers vision, a glimpse into the mysterious acceptance of what lies beyond. Her prophetic nature is not about fortune-telling, but about knowing. Luna knows things not through books or divination, but through presence and perception. She sees Harry's internal struggle more clearly than those closest to him. When Dumbledore dies and the world reels, Luna doesn't become frantic. She hangs a portrait of friends on her bedroom ceiling and writes "friends" in gold letters. It's her way of anchoring to what matters. Not to victory or strategy, but to human connection. In the face of death and war, she responds with sincerity. In Deathly Hallows, Luna becomes even more important. She is kidnapped and held prisoner in Malfoy Manor for months, but even then she retains her kindness and clarity. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione are captured and brought to the manor, Luna greets them with calmness and warmth. She is not broken by the experience. She even helps them escape. Luna, the one so often ridiculed, becomes a source of steadiness in the darkest hour. Her optimism is not naive, it is chosen. She faces evil and chooses to remain whole. When Dobby dies, one of the most poignant moments in the series, it is Luna who closes his eyes and whispers, "There." Now he could be sleeping. In that small gesture, Luna shows more emotional intelligence than most adults in the series. She dignifies the moment, not with noise, but with reverence. She gives Dobby what every fallen warrior deserves, peace. Luna's prophetic role lies in her ability to see the sacred in the mundane, to recognize the humanity in everyone, even in the moments that others rush past. And consider this, when Harry walks to his own death in the Forbidden Forest, he is not accompanied by Ron or Hermione. He is accompanied by the Resurrection Stone's spirits, his parents, Sirius, Lupin. But the real spiritual preparation comes earlier, from those who help him reach that state of peace. Luna is part of that foundation. She teaches him to accept death not as defeat, but as a passage. Her belief in what lies beyond doesn't come from doctrine, it comes from experience. She lives with loss and chooses hope. Luna's honesty is unfiltered. She does not flatter, does not posture. She tells Harry he looks exceptionally ordinary before Slughorn's party. She calls out the corruption in the ministry without fear. Her father, Xenophilius Lovegood, may be compromised later in the story, but Luna never is. Even under pressure, she speaks with clarity. When she is finally freed from the Malfoy Manor, her first thoughts are not about revenge, but about helping Harry. She has no bitterness. Her heart remains open, always. Rowling plants clues about Luna's deeper role throughout the series. Her first appearance is jarring, almost comedic. But reread those scenes and you'll find a consistent thread. Luna sees what others do not. She sees Thestrals, she sees Harry's pain, she sees beyond the veil, she sees the beauty in things others call foolish. It is no accident that she becomes a member of the core resistance. No accident that Harry trusts her judgment. When he needs someone to distract the Death Eaters at Hogwarts, he turns to Luna, because somewhere deep down he knows she understands the bigger picture. Luna is also the only student who tries to uplift Harry in the brutal chaos of Ravenclaw Tower. When others question him, She supports him. She is unafraid to say what she feels. This too is prophetic, not in foretelling the future, but in confronting the moment with truth. In times of crisis, Luna becomes the moral compass. She reminds the characters and the reader of what really matters. Not glory, not power, but sincerity, friendship and faith in unseen things. Her belief in the impossible is what gives her strength. She trusts Harry when others doubt him. She believes he can defeat Voldemort not because she's blindly hopeful, but because she sees goodness in him. Luna has always seen through masks. She sees through the fear, the politics, the lies. It is why, at the final battle, she is not afraid. She fights not out of vengeance, but out of love. Her courage is spiritual, not just physical. In one of the final scenes, after the battle is over, Luna does something small but significant. When Harry is overwhelmed by attention, it is Luna who leads him away from the crowd. She knows what he needs, not applause, but peace. She is the only one who understands that the hero of this story doesn't want to be worshipped. He wants to rest. Luna, the supposed lunatic, reads his heart without needing a single word. Even years later, the legacy of Luna Lovegood remains profound. She becomes a naturalist, traveling the world and studying magical creatures. Her work is not glamorous, but it is meaningful. She continues to look where others don't. She lives on the fringes, not because she's outcast, but because that's where the truth often resides. Luna doesn't need the spotlight to shine. She illuminates from within. There's a passage in Order of the Phoenix that encapsulates Luna's essence. After Harry returns from the ministry and no one can quite understand his grief, he finds himself beside Luna once more. She tells him about losing her mother and seeing the Thestrals for the first time. She doesn't cry. She doesn't offer solutions. She just says, "I'll see you around, Harry," and walks away. That moment isn't dramatic, but it lingers, because in a world full of noise, Luna's quiet truths resonate the loudest. Perhaps Rowling's greatest message through Luna is this: not all truths come wrapped in logic and credibility. Some truths wear radish earrings and talk about crumple-horned snorkax. But that doesn't make them less true. Luna Lovegood, in her strange and gentle way, is the clearest voice of them all. And those who listened to her, really listened, found themselves closer to the heart of the story. She is not comic relief, she is the quiet prophet of the wizarding world, and she was right all along. Number 21, The Children's Names, Rowling's final gift. It was never just about a scar or a prophecy or a boy with glasses who survived. From the moment Harry Potter stepped onto platform 9 3/4, we were pulled into a world that shimmered with magic, but burned with real emotion, loss, longing, love. And when the final chapter closed on the words, "All was well," some readers took a breath of peace, while others frowned at the simplicity of the ending. But it wasn't simple. It was a quiet declaration of survival. It was the full circle of a life that had been torn apart and patiently, piece by piece, rebuilt. And at the very heart of this quiet final message were 3 names, 3 children, each carrying a weight deeper than most ever realized. James Sirius, Albus Severus, Lily Luna. On the surface, these names seemed too on the nose, almost like fan service. Critics muttered about unoriginal choices, but J.K. Rowling wasn't making a list. She was crafting a legacy. For Harry, naming his children wasn't just a sentimental gesture. It was an act of emotional defiance against the darkest force he had ever known. Not Voldemort, but oblivion. Harry Potter is an orphan. That fact has always hovered like a silent shadow behind every spell he casts, every friendship he clings to. From the cupboard under the stairs to the battlefield at Hogwarts, Harry's actions have always been shaped by absence. But he never allowed that absence to become emptiness. When he chose names for his children, he filled that void with memory, not statues, not portraits, but living blood. Let's begin with James Sirius Potter, the eldest son. James was his father, Sirius was his godfather, both lost to the cruelty of a war Harry never chose. Both died trying to protect him. Yet while their deaths marked Harry, it was their lives that formed his foundation. James represented a time Harry never knew, a time of youthful laughter, of mischief, of family dinners and broomsticks soaring through the sky. Sirius, however, gave Harry something else entirely, the audacity to believe in freedom. As a boy, Harry stared into the fireplace of the Gryffindor common room just to catch a glimpse of Sirius's face. That was how desperately he needed connection, and so when his firstborn arrived, it made sense that Harry's deepest instinct was to give that boy a name that shouted defiance against the idea that the people he loved were gone. Naming his second son Albus Severus was a bolder, more complicated choice. In the epilogue, Harry tells his son, "You were named after 2 headmasters of Hogwarts. One of them was a Slytherin, and he was probably the bravest man I ever knew." This wasn't just a tribute, it was a reconciliation. Dumbledore, the man of secrets and burdens, who once used Harry as a pawn but also protected him with unrelenting strategy. Snape, the man Harry hated most, only to discover he had been his fiercest protector. This name was a healing scar. By placing the names Albus and Severus together, Rowling intertwined mercy and complexity. It was a final recognition that people are not black or white. And Harry, who once saw the world as light versus dark, now embraced the in-between. What's most striking about the name Albus Severus is that it merges love with guilt. Harry did not forgive Snape easily. The bitterness between them spanned years, sharp with insult and misunderstanding. But when Harry saw the memory of Snape crying beside Lily's lifeless body, calling her name like a broken hymn, the truth splintered him. Snape wasn't only mourning Lily, he was mourning the life he could never have. Naming his son after Snape wasn't a gesture of pity. It was a solemn vow to remember that even the most flawed men can make the most painful sacrifices. Then there is Lily Luna, the youngest and the quietest of the trio in the text, yet her name sings the loudest. Lily, his mother, the woman who died shielding her child, the source of the magic that saved him, and Luna, his friend, the dreamy girl who believed in impossible things. This pairing of names was deliberate. Lily represented unconditional love, and Luna represented unshakable belief. Together they formed a name that whispered not just of the past, but of hope. By naming his daughter Lily Luna, Harry wasn't just honoring the dead, he was planting their essence into the future. What Rowling accomplished here was more than nostalgia. It was resurrection through lineage. Harry, who had no photos, no birthdays, no bedtime stories with his parents, now had the chance to do what had never been done for him: raise children in the light. And not just in safety, but with memory as their inheritance. His children wouldn't grow up not knowing who their grandparents were. They would know that James loved Quidditch, that Lily had green eyes just like theirs. They would know that Sirius escaped from Azkaban not for freedom, but for love. They would know that Severus Snape, the man with greasy hair and cold eyes, was a soldier in disguise. And they would know that Albus Dumbledore, the world's greatest wizard, once cried for a boy with a lightning scar. There's a moment in Deathly Hallows that often goes unnoticed, but strikes a deep chord. After Harry walks into the Forbidden Forest to die, he pulls out the Resurrection Stone. There, his parents appear. So do Sirius and Remus. He asks, "You'll stay with me?" And they answer, "Until the very end." That line is not just about the impending battle. It's about every moment Harry would live afterward. They would stay with him in his choices, in his marriage, in his parenting, and especially in the names he would give to the next generation. This is where Rowling's genius lies, not in twisting plots, but in quiet echoes. The children's names are not arbitrary. They are the final lines of a symphony. They tell us who Harry became, not a hero, but a man who remembered. Every time someone calls for James, for Albus, for Lily, they're also calling out to the past. They're reminding us that love outlasts death. Another layer that often goes unnoticed is that these names are not just gifts from Harry to the dead, but from Rowling to her readers. Over the years, readers have mourned the loss of Sirius, of Lupin, of Fred, of Dobby. These weren't just characters. They were companions through our own hardships. Rowling could have ended the series with fanfare. Instead, she gave us names. She brought them back in the only way that truly matters, in flesh and blood, in legacy. By naming his son James Sirius, Harry reclaims joy. He remembers laughter in a flying motorbike, fire whiskey in a hidden room, a smirk in the face of danger. Through Albus Severus, he remembers sacrifice. He keeps close the idea that redemption is not just possible, it is noble. And through Lily Luna, he cradles the idea that softness, gentleness, and belief are not weaknesses, but strengths. There's also a quiet defiance here. Voldemort, who tried to conquer death through Horcruxes, through violence, fragmentation, and terror, could never understand the kind of immortality Harry chose. Harry didn't split his soul to live forever. He mended it, and then he passed it on. That's what makes these names powerful. They are acts of whole remembrance. Some say that all was well was too simple a phrase, but they miss the deeper truth. Peace is never simple for those who've walked through fire. For Harry, peace wasn't a reward, it was a choice. He could have drowned in grief, grown bitter, taught his children to fear the past. But instead he gave them names that told a story of love, loss, and survival. He gave them names that made the dead breathe again. In the Muggle world, names often lose meaning. But in the Wizarding world, names have power. They open vaults. They bind maps. They summon spirits. And here they serve a final enchantment, one last spell from Rowling to us, reminding us that stories don't end, they echo. And sometimes they echo through the voice of a father calling to his son, "Albus, it's okay." Perhaps the greatest magic Rowling ever cast wasn't in wands or potions, but in the way she made us remember, the way she made death a doorway, not a wall, the way she gave Harry the strength to forgive, to name, to continue. Through those names, she gave us a lesson. That healing is not forgetting, it is remembering with love. In the quiet pages of the epilogue, we don't just see a grown man sending his child off to school. We see the boy who once thought he had no one now standing with a family of his own. And every name he calls, every hug he gives, is a spell far greater than Avada Kedavra. It's a spell of life. So when someone says, "Why would Harry name his son after Snape?" or "Why such obvious names?" The answer is clear. Because Harry is not just the boy who lived, he's the boy who remembered. And that, in the end, is what saves him. Number 22, Ron's fear of spiders. It was a cold September night in the Gryffindor common room when Harry first learned of Ron's mortal terror. A shadow had passed over the fireplace, and Ron Weasley, usually so casual in posture, flinched violently. "I don't like spiders," he said, through clenched teeth. The moment was brief, even humorous, but it planted a seed that J.K. Rowling would water carefully over the next 6 years. Ron's fear of spiders is first truly revealed in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, when he and Harry follow a trail of clues to the Forbidden Forest. Their journey leads them to Aragog, a monstrous acromantula the size of a small elephant, with legs like tree trunks and a voice like scraping metal. The encounter is terrifying for any 12-year-old, but for Ron it was pure nightmare. "Follow the spiders," Hagrid had said. And Ron had replied with the now iconic line, "Why couldn't it be follow the butterflies?" On the surface, this fear was always played for comic relief. Ron, shaking, pale, muttering and twitching in the forest, was a moment of levity in an otherwise dark chapter. But Rowling, ever the master of layering, had hidden something deeper inside that joke. Ron's arachnophobia wasn't just a childhood quirk, it was a symbol of vulnerability. In a story filled with bravery, prophecies, and chosen ones, Ron's fear reminded readers that even heroes have irrational terrors. His was just more visible. The context of Ron's fear is deeply human. According to Chamber of Secrets, it started when Fred turned his teddy bear into a spider when Ron was 3. The bear had already lost most of its fluff, and in Ron's memory, it transformed into something hideous, writhing with legs. This origin, though light-hearted, captures something significant. Fears are often born in childhood, but they grow with us. Ron never dealt with it, not until he had to. Throughout the series, Ron is the embodiment of the ordinary. He is not the boy who lived. He is not the brightest witch of her age. He is the loyal friend, the youngest son in a large family, often overlooked, often doubting his own worth. His fear of spiders, in the detail Rowling introduces early and subtly reinforces throughout, becomes a touchstone for that ordinary humanity. It is his weakness, but it is also his test. The test finally arrives in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. In a tent under the stars, in a forest cold and indifferent, Ron returns to the trio after leaving them. An act born of Horcrux-induced paranoia and deep-rooted insecurity. To regain their trust, Ron must do more than apologize. He must prove his loyalty in action. That opportunity comes in the form of the locket Horcrux. The Horcrux, once opened, reveals the darkest fears and insecurities of whoever confronts it. For Ron, it shows him a vision of Harry and Hermione together, mocking him, belittling him, rendering him invisible. But even before he confronts the hallucination, there is something else guarding the Horcrux. It takes the form of a spider. Large, grotesque, monstrous. This is not Aragog. This is the shape of Ron's fear itself. The symbolism could not be more pointed. The Horcrux latches onto Ron's deepest emotional scars, and one of them is his terror of spiders. This time, however, he doesn't cower, he doesn't run, he acts. With Gryffindor's sword in hand, he slices through the spider, the physical manifestation of his oldest fear, and then destroys the Horcrux. In that moment, he is no longer the boy who flinched at shadows. He is a man who confronts both the darkness outside and within. This act is more than just a plot point. It is a moment of character transcendence. Rowling uses this scene to quietly complete a transformation she began in Chamber of Secrets. Ron no longer needs others to save him from what he dreads. He has become the kind of person who saves himself. The spider, once a joke, becomes a symbol of victory. Rowling once said in an interview that the character's fears were carefully chosen, that fear and how you deal with it is more revealing than strength. Harry fears Dementors not because they are dangerous, but because they take away every memory of love and warmth he has. Hermione fears failure, that she is not good enough, not worthy. Ron fears being small, being last, being unimportant, being eaten alive by the thing he's always been scared of. When he kills the Spider Horcrux, he defeats more than Voldemort's magic. He defeats a version of himself, the one ruled by fear. The artistry of Rowling's writing is in the way she plants these themes in scenes that seem casual. Aragog's lair was terrifying, yes, but the takeaway wasn't monsters live in the forest. The takeaway was, even when you are terrified, you follow your friend into the dark. Ron had every reason to refuse, but he went. And that planted the idea that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the will to move forward despite it. Rowling does not preach this lesson directly, she shows it. Over and over, Ron steps forward when he could have stepped back. He plays chess with life-sized pieces to protect Harry and Hermione. He faces Death Eaters at the Department of Mysteries. He volunteers for dangerous missions with the Order. And each time he is not without fear. That is what makes it real. That is what makes it growth. It is no accident that Ron destroys the locket with Gryffindor's sword. That sword, which appears only to those who are truly brave, arrives for him alone. Rowling could have written it differently, could have had Harry hand him the sword or share the moment. But she doesn't, because this is Ron's fear, Ron's battle, Ron's sword. The imagery is mythic. A boy who feared spiders since he was 3 stands in a forest facing a monstrous illusion and drives a blade through it. It is almost Arthurian, a test of spirit disguised as a physical challenge. and by passing it, Ron not only helps the mission, he finds a piece of himself that he didn't know was missing. Readers who saw Ron only as comic relief missed this thread. But it was always there. Rowling had been telling us since Book 2 that this moment would come. That fear, treated lightly, could also be deadly serious. The joke was never just a joke, it was a mirror. Even the way the Horcrux speaks reflects this deeper theme. Least loved, always left behind. It hisses, playing on Ron's insecurities. And yet Ron does not falter. He sees through it. He doesn't deny the fear. He overcomes it. That's what makes it powerful. He grows not by pretending the fear wasn't real, but by defeating it anyway. This moment also redefines Ron's role in the trio. For years, readers have debated what is Ron's function. Harry is the leader, the chosen one. Hermione is the brains, the planner. Ron is often seen as the comic relief or the backup, but here he is the heart. He is the one who falls, then returns, who is tested, then triumphs. Rowling's message is subtle but profound. Loyalty, vulnerability, and the ability to change are forms of heroism too. Fear is a quiet force in the series. It stalks the halls of Hogwarts. It takes the form of boggarts and dementors, of dark marks and vanishing friends. But Rowling never lets it win. In the end, her characters triumph, not because they are fearless, but because they are brave. And Ron's arc is perhaps the most honest portrayal of that truth. What makes Ron's victory so compelling is that it was earned. It was not about prophecy or destiny. It was about choice. He chose to come back. He chose to face the Horcrux. He chose to face the spider. And in that he became a symbol, not of magic, but of maturity. In a series where magical beasts and ancient spells often take the spotlight, it is easy to miss the emotional journeys beneath. But Rowling wove them in deliberately. The spider was never just a monster. It was a metaphor for fear, for childhood, for the way we carry old wounds into new wars. Ron's triumph was never about the locket. It was about the boy who once screamed in the forest, now standing tall with a sword in hand. And so in the Deathly Hallows, when the blade comes down and the Horcrux shatters, it is not just evil that dies. A piece of Ron's fear dies with it. And in its place, something stronger is born. Not perfection, not fearlessness, but resilience, growth, manhood. That is the genius of Rowling's detail. To take a childhood phobia, plant it early, use it often for humor, and then turn it into a revelation. A spider becomes a symbol, a fear becomes a forge. And Ron Weasley, awkward, funny, insecure Ron, becomes a warrior. In the end, the journey of Harry Potter is not just about defeating Voldemort. It is about defeating the things that paralyze us: fear, self-doubt, grief. And in that, Ron's arc may be the most universal of all. Because who among us has not feared the spiders under the bed? But not all of us choose to follow them into the forest. And not all of us come out wielding a sword. Number 23, the symbolism of number 7. In the world, J.K. Rowling crafted a realm of shifting staircases, hidden doors and sentient portraits. Nothing is left to chance. Even the numbers she chooses pulse with ancient magic. Among them, the number 7 rises above the rest, quietly woven into the narrative like a ghost thread of fate, vibrating through every book. Readers might miss it on the surface, but it hums in the background, anchoring the saga in a kind of symbolic rhythm. This is not just a literary trick, it is a spell of structure, a code of myth, a whisper of timeless numerology embedded in the heart of Harry Potter's story. There are 7 books in the Harry Potter series. At first glance, this seems merely practical, a natural arc from childhood to adulthood, 1 book per school year. But Rowling chose 7 for more than narrative convenience. She selected it with the deliberation of a witch inscribing runes into stone. 7 is ancient. In myth, religion and folklore, 7 recurs endlessly. 7 days of creation, 7 deadly sins, 7 heavens, 7 seals. Rowling did not invent this symbolism, she channeled it. 7 brings with it the aura of completeness, of destiny fulfilled. From the first pages of the Philosopher's Stone to the final line of the Deathly Hallows, the story beats to the drum of 7. Hogwarts too obeys this sacred rhythm. Students are sorted at 11 and remain for 7 years, a full cycle of growth and transformation. Harry arrives as a wide-eyed orphan, raw and unsure. He leaves at 17, weathered, broken in places, but whole. Every year marks a crucible of challenge and change, from the troll in the dungeon of first year, to the resurrected Voldemort in the 4th, to the loss of Dobby and the Battle of Hogwarts in the 7th. The school itself becomes a temple of alchemical initiation, with 7 stages of development echoing the ancient spiritual quest toward enlightenment. Quidditch, the wizarding world's most beloved sport, is not immune to this pattern. Each team has 7 players, 3 chasers, 2 beaters, 1 keeper, and 1 seeker. The balance of offense and defense, brute force and elegance, mirrors the larger dynamics of the wizarding war. Harry, always the seeker, is the one who chases the hidden, the elusive, the golden snitch of truth. 7 players working in tandem is not a coincidence. It's a ritual reenactment of the deeper unity Rowling builds into her magical universe. And then there are the 7 obstacles guarding the Philosopher's Stone, each designed by a different professor, each trial uniquely tailored to challenge mind, body, and soul. There is the trapdoor, the devil's snare, the flying keys, the life-sized chessboard, the troll, the logic puzzle, and finally, the mirror of Erised. 7 steps like a ladder ascending from the mundane to the divine. The final challenge is not physical strength but inner truth. Harry does not conquer the trials through brute force but by loyalty, intellect, and moral clarity. These 7 trials form a miniature journey, an echo of the full saga, leading to a truth that is both magical and personal. But perhaps the darkest manifestation of the number 7 lies within Voldemort's soul. In his manic obsession with immortality, Tom Riddle tears his soul into 7 fragments. He succeeded in making 6 Horcruxes, Dumbledore tells Harry in The Half-Blood Prince, and kept the 7th part, the last, hidden in his transformed body. This isn't mere villainy, it's ritual. Voldemort believes in the power of 7 just as deeply as the forces of good do. He believes it will anchor his immortality. 7, as Slughorn says in the same book, is the most powerfully magical number. In his pursuit of deathlessness, Voldemort becomes an unwilling acolyte of the very symbolic system he seeks to defile. The Horcruxes themselves form a grim constellation. Tom Riddle's diary, Marvel O'Gaunt's ring, Helga Hufflepuff's cup, Rowena Ravenclaw's diadem, Salazar Slytherin's locket, Nagini the snake, and finally, the piece inside Harry. Each item chosen with symbolic weight, each linked to the founders or to Voldemort's personal history. Destroying them becomes more than a quest. It is a purification, a dismantling of the cursed 7. The story begins to invert itself. Where Voldemort created 7 to avoid death, Harry must destroy 7 to bring balance. And in a cruel irony, Voldemort's careful division fails to achieve his desired 7. By making Harry a Horcrux without intent, he tips the scale into 8. Symbolic harmony is broken. And perhaps Rowling hints this is why he fails. The universe resists imbalance. 7 is sacred, 8 is aberrant. And so the boy with the scar, the unintentional 7th fragment, becomes both flaw and cure in Voldemort's scheme. He is the ghost in the machine, the poetic justice of prophecy. Rowling even builds 7 into the structure of prophecy itself. The mysterious message Sybil Trelawney delivers, born as the 7th month dies, marks Harry as chosen. It is not August or October, it is July the 7th month. The language is deliberate. Prophecy and number entwine, creating a net of fate. In a world of shifting alliances and unreliable visions, 7 is the fixed star. The Weasley family, a symbol of warmth and love, echoes this number with their 7 children: Bill, Charlie, Percy, Fred, George, Ron, and Ginny. They are chaos and comfort, a beacon of light against Voldemort's darkness. Their number alone becomes symbolic. 7 siblings bound by affection, not ambition. While Voldemort carves 7 pieces of soul to achieve domination, Molly Weasley births 7 lives out of love. The contrast is deliberate and profound. In this symmetry, Rowling reminds us it is not the number alone that holds power, but the intention behind its use. Even the Order of the Phoenix's daring escape from Privet Drive involves 7 Harrys. To protect the real boy, 6 others take Polyjuice Potion and transform into his double. "We are all Harry," they say, not in words, but in action. It's a ritual of identity and sacrifice. 7 bodies scatter across the skies, a living metaphor for the burden Harry carries. The true one is hidden among reflections, just as the truth in Rowling's story is hidden among symbols. And consider the Triwizard Tournament, a contest built on 3 tasks. Yet the final challenge leads Harry to a graveyard, where 7 Death Eaters form the circle of rebirth. Voldemort rises among 7, his father's grave, Wormtail, and 5 loyal servants. The ritual of his resurrection, though not overtly framed in 7s, echoes that pattern. The forces of evil circle back to their sacred number, again, not in honor, but in perversion. Even the Marauders map whispers in 7s, Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, 4 names. But their legacy stretches through time to 3 more, Harry, Fred, and George, the next generation of mischief makers. Their link is not blood, but spirit. Together they form a symbolic 7 tricksters united across decades, winking at authority, walking unseen. Rowling's use of 7 is not confined to plot devices. It is embedded in the fabric of character arcs. Consider the 7 Defense Against the Dark Arts professors: Quirrell, Lockhart, Lupin, Moody, Crouch, Umbridge, Snape, and, finally, Carrow in the last book, though unofficially. Each professor unveils a different face of power, deception, or virtue. From cowardice to corruption, from wisdom to cruelty, these 7 represent the full spectrum of magical morality. The series seems to say, before Harry can understand the dark arts, he must first see all their masks. There is also the symbolic journey of the Hallows. 3 objects, the Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone, and the Invisibility Cloak, are pursued by 7 characters at various times. Dumbledore seeks all 3. Voldemort covets the wand. Harry inherits the cloak and becomes master of all. But also Grindelwald, Xenophilius Lovegood, Antioch Peverell, and Cadmus all play roles. 7 lives orbit the legend of the Hallows, each touching the boundary between life and death, desire and loss. The number permeates even Harry's ultimate sacrifice. In the Forbidden Forest, walking toward death, Harry sees 7 lights before him, souls of the dead echoing the Resurrection Stone's gift. James, Lily, Sirius, Remus, his inner circle, but beyond them, others who are unseen yet felt. 7 forms of love guide him toward the end. This is no random motif. Rowling sculpts it with precision, giving spiritual depth to every shadow. The final battle at Hogwarts is fought in waves. It is not one duel, but many. 7 moments of confrontation build toward the climax: the castle siege, the room of requirement, the bridge defense, the courtyard skirmish, the Hall of the Dead, the duel of Bellatrix, and the final face-off with Voldemort. 7 stages, like 7 tolls of a bell, and with each strike, a part of the old world dies and something new is born. Even the epilogue offers a subtle wink. 19 years later, Harry's son is named Albus Severus, 2 names but born of 7 letters in total. The numbers don't scream at you, they whisper. They remain in the margins like a charm drawn in dust. Yet once seen, they cannot be unseen. The truth is simple and yet profound. Rowling didn't merely use the number 7 because it sounded right. She built her world upon it. It was her metronome. It was the breath behind the words, the hidden heartbeat of destiny. 7, always 7, not by chance, but by design. Number 24, Crookshanks, the Watcher Cat. Crookshanks was never meant to be just a cat. In the grand weave of Rowling's sprawling tapestry, filled with dragons, dementors, time-turners, and unbreakable vows, it would be easy to dismiss the ginger feline with a squashed face as nothing more than an eccentric pet belonging to the ever-meticulous Hermione Granger. But for readers who know how to look, not unlike Dumbledore with his half-moon spectacles tilted low, Crookshanks reveals himself to be something far more than a magical pet. He is a thread, a signpost, and a mirror carefully sewn into the story to signal Hermione's quiet but powerful transformation from rule-bound student to instinct-guided witch. In a world where nothing happens by accident, Crookshanks is a character cloaked in fur, an embodiment of intuitive magic, and perhaps Rowling's most underappreciated clue. When Hermione buys Crookshanks in Prisoner of Azkaban, it's not just a random moment. It's summer, Diagon Alley is abuzz, and she stumbles upon the magical menagerie. While Harry is focused on his firebolt dreams and Ron is fuming over his pet rat, Scabbers, Hermione makes a decision that is oddly impulsive for her. She chooses Crookshanks despite his odd appearance and aggressive nature. "He's gorgeous, isn't he?" she says, brushing off the shopkeeper's concern that no one else wanted him. It's the first time we see Hermione follow an emotional, almost instinctive pull rather than reason or research. In the rigid world of spells and wand movements, this moment is quietly revolutionary for her. Crookshanks does not behave like an ordinary cat. He seems to be aware of hidden truths long before the humans around him catch on. The most glaring example is his immediate and violent dislike of Scabbers, Ron's rat. Readers initially interpret this as simple animal hostility. Cats chase rats, after all. But the truth, when it arrives like a thunderclap later in the story, changes everything. Scabbers is not a rat. He is Peter Pettigrew, an animagus, a man who faked his death and betrayed James and Lily Potter to Lord Voldemort. Crookshanks's aggression was not random. It was the earliest warning of a hidden truth. In fact, Crookshanks's behavior towards Sirius Black, another animagus, is a further confirmation of his exceptional perception. When Black, disguised as the dog Padfoot, lurks around Hogwarts, Crookshanks not only fails to attack him but actively assists him. It is Crookshanks who steals passwords from Neville Longbottom and delivers them to Sirius. It is Crookshanks who guides Sirius to the Whomping Willow's secret knot. These actions are not those of a mere animal. They are calculated, deliberate, and moral. Crookshanks knows who the true enemy is. Rowling subtly tells us that Crookshanks is no ordinary feline. In the magical menagerie, the shopkeeper says, "He's been in here for ages, no one wants him." It's almost as though Crookshanks has been waiting for someone who can see past appearances. Hermione, the girl who always tries to do what is right, even if it means bending the rules, is that person. Her choice to adopt Crookshanks becomes a symbolic moment, an unspoken contract between logic and intuition. From here on, she begins to change. It's important to note that Crookshanks is part Kneazle, a magical creature known for its intelligence and, most importantly, its ability to detect untrustworthy people. J.K. Rowling confirms this outside the books. Crookshanks is part Kneazle, and that explains his distaste for Ron's rat, Scabbers, who was really a man in disguise. The inclusion of a part Kneazle is no small detail. It means that Hermione, though she may not know it, now has a familiar who sees beyond illusions. The fact that she accepts this creature with all his sharp instincts shows a growing alignment between her heart and her magic. Until that moment, Hermione was the rulebook witch. Her spells were perfect because they were practiced. Her knowledge of magical creatures came from textbooks, not from lived experience. But after adopting Crookshanks, something shifts. She begins to act more from belief than from theory. She trusts her gut. When no one believes in Sirius's innocence, it is Hermione who listens, questions, and eventually helps expose the truth. It's not just about learning spells anymore, it's about seeing. In many ways, Crookshanks is Hermione's external intuition. He behaves the way she begins to think, subtle, precise, and guided by a sense of right and wrong that goes beyond rules. When Crookshanks launches himself at Pettigrew, it foreshadows Hermione's own eventual confrontations with moral ambiguity. She will later erase her parents' memories to keep them safe. She will join an illegal resistance in school. She will break into the Ministry of Magic. The girl who once corrected everyone's pronunciation of Wingardium Leviosa will become a leader who makes impossible choices. Crookshanks is the first real sign of that future. There's a moment in The Prisoner of Azkaban when Ron accuses Crookshanks of eating Scabbers. Hermione is heartbroken, not just because her pet is blamed, but because she feels a rift forming between herself and her friends. But even in this emotional whirlwind, she doesn't give up on Crookshanks. She defends him not out of stubbornness, but because something in her tells her he's right. This is faith, a trait not typically associated with Hermione until this point. Crookshanks becomes her first act of magical trust. In classic literature, animals often symbolize facets of their owners' souls. Crookshanks follows this pattern. As Hermione matures, so does his role in the story. He's no longer just the troublesome cat, he's the character who knows things before others do. When Sirius and Remus reveal Pettigrew's true identity in the Shrieking Shack, it's not magic that exposes him, it's a cat, and a girl who listened to her cat when no one else would. "If you made a better rat than a human, it's not much to boast about, Peter," says Sirius. But in that moment, the real revelation is Hermione's. Her choice, her belief, is vindicated. Rowling never draws a red circle around Crookshanks. She doesn't need to. His purpose is hidden in plain sight, much like Pettigrew himself. But the quiet brilliance of his inclusion lies in what he tells us about Hermione. She is evolving. In a book full of magical artifacts, Crookshanks is something more powerful, a moral compass with fur. In a world of polyjuice potions and animagi, the truth is often disguised. Crookshanks cuts through that fog with a hiss and a glare. And Hermione watches. We see the culmination of this growth in later books. By the time the trio is hunting Horcruxes in Deathly Hallows, Hermione is no longer just a strategist. She is the heart and the anchor. Her magic is as emotional as it is intellectual. The roots of this transformation are in her relationship with Crookshanks. He taught her to trust feelings, not just facts. He helped her believe that knowledge isn't always found in books. Sometimes it's in the eyes of a creature who knows more than he can say. Even Crookshanks's appearance is symbolic. He's not pretty. His face is squashed, his gait lurching. But he's wise, and Hermione sees that. Her acceptance of him mirrors her eventual acceptance of the chaotic, imperfect world around her. She learns that doing what's right doesn't always mean doing what's neat or approved. Crookshanks becomes a constant reminder of that lesson. The real magic in Rowling's world is in the connections, the silent alliances between people and things that seem trivial. Crookshanks is a thread connecting intuition, transformation, and hidden truths. His actions reshape the story's direction, and yet he asks for nothing. He is the ghost of insight, a whisper in fur, constantly pulling Hermione toward who she's meant to become. There's a deep poetry in the fact that Crookshanks only appears meaningfully in the book, where time itself is bent. Prisoner of Azkaban is a story about perception, about seeing what was hidden, about turning back time to correct a misjudged truth. Crookshanks is the character who sees rightly from the beginning, needing no time-turner. He lives in the present but perceives the hidden past. He is Hermione's true companion in that lesson. While other characters flaunt their magical power, Crookshanks embodies a subtler force, the quiet certainty that something is wrong, even when the world says it's right. That force, once embraced by Hermione, shapes her future more than any spell ever could. It's why she later chooses to become the Minister for Magic in Rowling's extended canon. She becomes the woman who sees what others miss, just like her cat. It's easy to overlook Crookshanks. He doesn't speak, he doesn't duel, but he does something more powerful. He reveals. And in a world of secrets, the ability to reveal is the greatest power of all. Hermione's journey from rule follower to intuitive leader is one of the richest arcs in the series. And it begins with a squashed-faced cat in a cluttered shop. In the end, Crookshanks's legacy is not in battles won or spells cast. It is in what he awakened. He is Hermione's first step toward trusting something more powerful than logic, her inner voice. And for a character defined by intellect, that is nothing short of magic. Number 25. The Trio and the Balance of Elements. In the world J.K. Rowling created, not a single thread is woven without intention. At first glance, the trio of Harry Potter, Hermione Granger, and Ron Weasley appears to be just a group of close friends bound by adventures and school life. But beneath the surface, their bond reflects something far more ancient and profound, the eternal concept of elemental balance. The triumvirate isn't just friendship, it is alchemy, It is a union of fire, air, and earth, the emotional, the rational, and the grounded. Rowling didn't merely write 3 characters. She orchestrated harmony in human form. Harry, the boy who lived, burns with the spark of fire. He is instinctive, passionate, and ruled by feeling rather than thought. His decisions are often rash, yet filled with heart. Hermione, in contrast, is a whirlwind of intellect, precise, logical, and endlessly curious. She represents the air, elusive, quick-moving, and vital for clarity. Ron, the often underestimated friend, is earth, steadfast, loyal, deeply human in his insecurities and love. He may stumble, but he never deserts. The 3 of them, woven together, are more than themselves. They are a force. When united, they achieve what none of them could alone. This idea is not merely poetic interpretation. Rowling built it into the very structure of the series. Take their first major test together in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. After descending past the trapdoor, they are faced with obstacles that reveal not just bravery, but the need for cooperation. Hermione's calm thinking and knowledge of Devil's Snare saves them from suffocation. Ron's grounded, strategic mind wins the life-sized chess game that nearly costs him his life. And Harry, driven by courage and impulse, is the one to move forward to meet Voldemort. Each one uses their own strength. Each element must shine. No one dominates. Balance triumphs. Without Hermione, Harry would have been strangled by magical vines in the dark. Without Ron, they wouldn't have passed the chessboard. Without Harry, the mission would have never been complete. Rowling emphasizes this structure repeatedly. The plot does not reward solitary action, it punishes it. Triumph arises only when the 3 forces act together, blending emotion, reason, and loyalty into a unified current. The deeper magic lies in this fusion. Their bond, forged in a world of dragons and dark lords, mirrors an ancient mystical principle: the unity of opposites. In medieval alchemy, true transformation came only when opposing elements were brought together in harmony. Fire must temper air, air must not flee the steadiness of earth, earth must be ignited by fire to awaken. This is not just metaphor, it is Rowling's hidden scaffolding. Harry's fury and instinct can light a path, but without Hermione's clarity, that fire would burn out of control. Ron's grounding presence is what keeps them from flying too close to the sun or sinking into chaos. They orbit one another, held in balance like celestial bodies. In the Chamber of Secrets, we see this dynamic deepened. When Harry and Ron fly the enchanted Ford Anglia to Hogwarts, chaos ensues. Hermione is absent, only the air is missing. Without her intellect and caution, they endanger themselves and the school. The result is not triumph, but punishment and isolation. The balance is broken. It is a warning. No element can be absent for long without consequences. Later, when Hermione is petrified by the basilisk, the boys flounder in confusion. Clues remain unsolved. Harry's fire rages helplessly. Ron's earth provides support, but without air, without intellect, they are grounded in ignorance. Only when they find the paper clutched in Hermione's hand do they regain the path forward. She, even in paralysis, restores clarity. Rowling never lets the reader forget. The trio is not a casual grouping, it is a ritual circle. Remove one corner and the circle shatters. Perhaps the clearest example of this elemental balance comes in The Prisoner of Azkaban, where time, identity, and memory blur. It is in this book that the trio confronts more than monsters. They confront fear itself. The Dementors, embodiments of depression and despair, attack the mind and soul. Harry, whose fire burns brightest, is the most affected. Ron, rooted in family and warmth, struggles but copes. Hermione, with her logic and precision, resists but cannot understand what Harry feels. During the rescue of Sirius Black, we witness an inversion. Hermione becomes action, borrowing some of Harry's fire as she uses the time turner to save Buckbeak. Ron, injured, is absent from this mission. The earth is cracked. But it works because Hermione and Harry temporarily balance one another. It is a precarious moment. The absence of Ron is felt, but not catastrophic, because the emotional and rational forces are momentarily fused. Rowling suggests that duality may survive briefly, but the triad remains the stronger current. In the Goblet of Fire, we see the most dangerous disruption to this equilibrium. The Triwizard Tournament places Harry in the spotlight, but at a great cost. Ron becomes jealous. Earth resents fire. The bond falters. Hermione attempts to mediate, but even she cannot patch a rift born of pride. Rowling writes this with painful honesty. Ron seemed to come to a halt and stared at Harry as though he had never seen him before. Their disconnection weakens Harry deeply, even if he pretends otherwise. The tournament is won, but Cedric dies and Voldemort returns. Fire burns alone, and the result is ashes. Throughout the Order of the Phoenix, Harry is often separated from his friends emotionally. His temper flares, he feels isolated and misunderstood. Dumbledore withholds information. The Order is secretive. Harry burns brighter and more dangerously on than ever. Ron and Hermione are there, but they struggle to reach him. The imbalance of power is palpable. Rowling shows us a Harry who is no longer whole, no longer centered. "I feel angry all the time," he admits. The fire has grown wild. Only in the climax, at the Department of Mysteries, do we see the trio reunite in purpose and face death together. Their teamwork, even amid tragedy, is what keeps them alive. In Half-Blood Prince, a different kind of fire threatens balance: love. Romantic feelings entangle the trio. Ron begins dating Lavender Brown, stoking Hermione's jealousy. The air thickens with unspoken tension. Harry, now attracted to Ginny, begins to drift into a world of emotion beyond friendship. The elemental balance begins to stretch. Hermione's logic fails her in the face of emotion. Ron's stability is shaken by insecurity. Yet still the foundation holds. The trio remains together, and when the time comes, they face the loss of Dumbledore united, if wounded. The full collapse of balance is most acutely felt in Deathly Hallows when Ron leaves. Earth is lost. Harry's fire flares uncontrolled, burning bridges. Hermione's air becomes cold, sharp, filled with suppressed grief. The Sword of Gryffindor cannot be found. The Locket Horcrux grows heavier with each day. Their mission stagnates. They camp, they wander, they hope, but nothing moves forward. The absence of Ron is not just emotional, it is mystical. The trio is no longer a trinity. The spell is broken. Ron's return is not just a plot point, it is restoration. Earth comes home, bringing balance once more. He retrieves the sword from the depths of the forest pool, guided by the light of the Deluminator and a moment of grace. Rowling gives him a rebirth, baptized in icy water, reborn not as comic relief, but as cornerstone. The unity of fire, air, and earth is complete again. And progress resumes. Even in the final battle, Rowling does not isolate Harry as the sole hero. The trio fights together. Ron and Hermione destroy a Horcrux. They face death side by side. The message is clear. The hero's journey is not a path for one. It is a path walked by three Kariu in balance. The prophecy may name Harry, but the prophecy does not win wars. Harmony does. One can even see this symbolism in the way Rowling constructs their appearances. Harry, with his wild dark hair and green eyes, is flame and mystery. Hermione's bushy curls and quick mind reflect the breezy chaos of thought. Ron's red hair and tall frame ground the trio with a rustic, earthy warmth. She paints with texture and tone, not just personality, but element. The trio's wand woods also echo their roles. Harry's wand is holly, a wood associated with protection and fire. Hermione's is vine, associated with seeking and learning, a symbol of growth and spiraling intellect. Ron's wand is ash, his first. Later, willow. Both trees rooted deeply in lore tied to healing, loyalty, and grounding. Even these choices are not random. Rowling's detail is surgical. Why does this elemental symbolism matter? Because it teaches us something profound, that strength does not lie in sameness but in difference. Rowling did not give Harry two clones. She gave him counterparts, foils, complements. Real friendships are not built on mirroring but on balancing. And in a world ruled by wands and wizards, the greatest power is not a spell, it is harmony. When the reader walks away from the final pages of the series, they may remember the battles, the betrayals, the pain, but the soul of the story is not who dies or who wins. It is who stands together. Harry, Hermione, and Ron are a testament not to individual greatness, but to collective force. To the idea that only by embracing fire, air, and earth, or by burning, breathing, and standing, can we overcome the darkest of nights. And that is Rowling's hidden magic, not just in wands or castles, but in the quiet alchemy of friendship. Number 26. Dobby the House Elf, the voice of freedom. Dobby entered the story as a bizarre interruption to Harry Potter's already chaotic life. With his bulging green eyes, mismatched clothes, and compulsive need for self-punishment, he appeared first as a comic relief, someone to laugh at, not to listen to. But that was Rowling's trick. She wanted readers, just like wizards, to dismiss house elves as oddities. And slowly, carefully, she dismantled that perception, revealing that Dobby, far from being comic, was a deeply tragic and ultimately heroic figure, one of the freest beings in a world obsessed with bloodlines, heritage, and control. Dobby's first appearance in the Chamber of Secrets carries more weight than it initially seems. He warns Harry not to return to Hogwarts, risking severe punishment from his masters, the Malfoys. It's easy to overlook that this act alone breaks powerful, magical contracts. House elves aren't just discouraged from disobedience, they are magically bound to it. For Dobby to defy his family was not only dangerous, it was revolutionary. "Dobby has come to protect Harry Potter, sir," he says in fear, trembling, and later injuring himself. The act of rebellion cloaked in comic behavior was Rowling's earliest hint. This was not just a frightened creature, this was a radical. In the same book, Dobby's punishment at the hands of Lucius Malfoy is brutal and dehumanizing. The Malfoy patriarch throws him across the room for daring to speak in Harry's defense. Dobby's shaking response is not hatred, but resignation. This is a world where servants are expected to endure abuse without complaint. Lucius represents the old order, pure-blood dominance, magical aristocracy, and an unwavering belief that creatures like Dobby are tools, not beings. And yet, when Harry tricks Lucius into giving Dobby a sock, an act that frees him, Dobby's gratitude is explosive. "Dobby is free," he whispers with tears in his eyes. But it's more than freedom from a cruel master. It's the birth of something radical in the magical world. The symbol of the sock is often remembered with a smile, but it should be remembered with reverence. In Rowling's world, it is a magical key, a token that severs ancient enchantments forged in slavery. But it also stands for something greater. The idea that even the smallest act, when done with intention, can fracture centuries of oppression. Harry, a boy who knows what it means to be imprisoned in a cupboard under the stairs, doesn't see Dobby as lesser. He sees someone worth saving. And that perspective, rare even among adult wizards, is what begins Dobby's transformation into a figure of quiet resistance. By Goblet of Fire, the reader sees Dobby not just as a free elf, but as someone making choices, hard ones, brave ones. He refuses to remain idle after his freedom. He doesn't vanish into a quiet life. Instead, he finds work at Hogwarts, insisting on being paid. This alone shocks wizards like Hermione, who believes all house elves deserve freedom, but has never encountered one who demands it. Dobby is not content with charity. He wants agency. Dobby is a free elf, and he can do what he wants, he says, proudly. It is a line that echoes like thunder in a world where freedom is still rationed. The job he takes at Hogwarts is not glamorous. He works in the kitchens alongside enslaved elves who mock him for wanting wages and days off. It is here that Rowling draws a striking parallel to real-world resistance movements. Those who rise often do so alone, mocked even by their peers. Dobby becomes an outsider among outsiders, someone who chose a harder path in pursuit of dignity. His relationship with Winky, another house elf, is a painful reminder that not everyone who suffers wants freedom. Some, like Winky, are broken by servitude to the point where they cannot imagine life beyond it. But Dobby never gives up trying to open their eyes. He becomes part of Hermione's Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, not because he needs help, but because he wants to help others. He is proof of what's possible. Hermione sees him as a living argument for why the wizarding world must change. Most wizards ignore or dismiss her cause, but Rowling shows through Dobby that change starts with individuals. And it's not always loud or celebrated. Sometimes it's a small elf wearing mismatched socks working for 2 galleons a week who is actually lighting the fuse of revolution. Dobby's loyalty to Harry deepens in Order of the Phoenix, but it is in Half-Blood Prince that we see the real extent of his transformation. When Dumbledore asks him to keep watch on Draco Malfoy, Dobby does not hesitate. He does not hide behind rules or fear. He becomes a spy, a dangerous role for anyone, let alone someone still mocked and disrespected by society. Alongside Kreacher, another elf with a vastly different attitude towards service, Dobby's sense of justice stands out. While Kreacher clings to blood purity and the glory of serving noble houses, Dobby clings to Harry and the idea of friendship born from choice, not obligation. In Deathly Hallows, Dobby's arc reaches its heartbreaking zenith. When Harry and his friends are captured and imprisoned in Malfoy Manor, it is Dobby who risks everything to save them. He apparates into a place saturated with dark magic, braving wizards who once nearly killed him. He arrives not as a servant, but as a rescuer. Dobby has come to rescue Harry Potter and his friends, he declares, echoing his very first appearance, but now with defiant pride, not trembling fear. The parallel is deliberate. Rowling wants the reader to remember who he was and who he has become. In the chaos that follows, Dobby grabs Luna Lovegood and Dean Thomas, apparates them to safety, and returns again for the others. He is the only one who can do it. No wizard dares to apparate inside the Malfoy estate. His magic, so often mocked, becomes the difference between life and death. And when he returns for Harry and Griphook, he is stabbed by Bellatrix Lestrange. As they disappear to safety, Dobby dies in Harry's arms. "Such a beautiful place to be with friends," are his last words. He dies not as a servant, but as a friend and a hero. The tragedy of Dobby's death is not just in the loss of a beloved character, it is the loss of a symbol. In a world that so rarely recognizes heroism without a wand, Dobby's sacrifice cuts deep. The wizarding world never knew what it had in Dobby. Most never even asked. Rowling makes it clear the ones at the margins often carry the greatest burdens. The ones considered lesser are the ones capable of the greatest acts of courage. Harry's grief is raw and sincere. He buries Dobby without magic, digging the grave by hand. On the headstone, he carves the words, "Here lies Dobby, a free elf." Not a house elf, not a servant, a free elf. This moment, tender and quiet, is Rowling's condemnation of the entire wizarding establishment. In the middle of war, this burial becomes a radical act of respect. It's Harry acknowledging that Dobby's life mattered just as much, if not more, than that of any wizard. No grand funeral, no ministry notice, just a boy, a grave, and the truth. Dobby's story is not an isolated one. It runs parallel to that of other house elves we meet, Winky, Kreacher, Hokey, each shaped by servitude, each reflecting different responses to oppression. But only Dobby breaks the cycle. He chooses freedom and then redefines what it means. He does not beg for approval. He demands autonomy. Even among Muggle-borns and half-bloods, such self-possession is rare. That it comes from a house elf is Rowling's subtle rebellion against the hierarchy she so carefully constructs in her magical society. Throughout the series, magic is shown as a source of power, but also a tool of control. The Ministry uses magic to oppress, to surveil, to punish. Pure-blood families use it to dominate others. Dobby, though powerful, uses his magic only to serve, protect, and free. In this, he becomes more noble than the nobles. He doesn't seek dominance, he seeks justice. When Hermione starts SPEW, she envisions an organized liberation, but Dobby lives it. Every sock he wears is a banner, every task he performs is laced with pride, not obedience. In a world obsessed with names, Malfoy, Black, Potter, Dobby has only one. No last name, no house, no lineage, just Dobby. It is both a symbol of his isolation and his independence. He is not defined by blood. He is not tied to a wand or a vault of gold. He is defined by choice, and that makes him dangerous. That makes him extraordinary. He is a character who proves that you don't need to be chosen by prophecy to change the world. Sometimes all it takes is one brave decision to disobey. Dobby's arc, when viewed from beginning to end, is one of the most complete in the entire series. He goes from trembling supplicant to proud saviour, from comic relief to martyr. Rowling gives him the structure of a hero's journey, but hides it beneath the form of a creature no one takes seriously. That in itself is genius. Dobby was never meant to be a sidekick. He was a mirror held up to the reader. Who do you dismiss? Who do you overlook? And what power might they be quietly holding? Even his name, Dobby, has folkloric roots in British tradition. A Dobby was a household spirit, often mischievous, sometimes helpful. Rowling reclaims that folklore and injects it with heart and conscience. Her Dobby is not mischievous, he is moral.
And in the end, that morality is what kills him. But it also saves everyone else. The rebellion he starts doesn't end with his death. It echoes through the choices of others. Creature changes, Hermione continues her fight, and Harry never forgets what Dobby taught him. Dobby is the voice of freedom in a world built on chains. He is the soft rebellion that grows louder with every book. In the shadows of the great war between good and evil, he becomes something even greater, a reminder that justice is not handed down by the powerful, but demanded by the brave, and sometimes the bravest are the ones the world refuses to see. Number 27, Hogwarts moving staircases. The path of change. There is a moment in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone that slips by almost unnoticed, a moment simple in appearance but profound in implication. There were 142 staircases at Hogwarts, Rowling writes, wide, sweeping ones, narrow, rickety ones, some that led somewhere different on a Friday, some with a vanishing step halfway up that you had to remember to jump. At first, it seems whimsical, just part of the school's unpredictable charm. But beneath the surface, it's a metaphor so precise that it quietly defines the entire structure of the Harry Potter saga. The staircases at Hogwarts do not merely move, they reflect the very essence of change, of growing up, of veering off course, and of how every turn, expected or not, becomes a part of one's journey. From the very beginning, Rowling does not allow her characters the luxury of predictability. Harry arrives at Hogwarts wide-eyed and hopeful, but almost immediately the staircases send him in the wrong direction. In his first year, they try to reach the charms classroom, but find themselves on the wrong floor due to a staircase that decided to shift mid-climb. That detour leads them to discover the third-floor corridor and the mystery of the Philosopher's Stone. What seemed like a random event is actually a push into the central plot. The staircase does not only change direction, it changes destiny. Rowling constructs her world so that what appears accidental is often deliberate. The path is never straight, and that's precisely the point. The metaphor deepens with every book. In the Chamber of Secrets, Harry and Ron miss the train to Hogwarts. An event triggered not by staircases but by another form of disruption. They fly the enchanted Ford Anglia instead. Again, what seems like a disaster turns into a chain of consequences that bring them face to face with Aragog, the diary of Tom Riddle, and the deeper truth about Ginny's possession. The living architecture of the wizarding world refuses to allow straight lines. Rowling uses physical disorientation as a literary technique. When the path changes, it changes the protagonist. Hermione, always the planner, hates unpredictability. She loathes the staircases. Their chaotic movement defies her rigid schedules. Yet, over time, she adapts. By the fifth book, she no longer curses their shifts. She anticipates them, moves with them. She has grown, not by mastering the path, but by surrendering to its nature. We could get caught, she warns often, yet she never stops moving forward. The once frustrating staircases are no longer obstacles.
They are part of her evolution, a living test of flexibility. and of learning that the world doesn't bend to one's will. Dumbledore, more than any other character, understands the symbolism of movement. He does not fight it, he flows with it. In The Half-Blood Prince, he tells Harry, "It is the unknown we fear when we look upon death and darkness, nothing more." That quote, often remembered for its wisdom, is tied intrinsically to the moving staircases of Hogwarts. Fear lies in unpredictability, but movement, even erratic, confusing movement, can be embraced. That is the message Dumbledore has always known, and which Harry learns over time. Consider the Marauder's map. It shows every person in Hogwarts, but more than that, it reveals the school's architecture in its living state, constantly shifting. The staircases, the hidden rooms, the passages that appear and vanish, all of it is part of a building that breathes. When Harry uses the map, he is not just spying, he is learning to read uncertainty. He watches names flicker and paths reroute. He adapts. The living school becomes a training ground not just for magic, but for the unpredictable nature of life itself. Neville Longbottom's growth arc, one of the most rewarding in the series, is also mapped along these shifting paths. The boy who forgets passwords and gets tangled in staircases transforms into a leader who kills Nagini. His journey is not linear. It is shaped by setbacks, wrong turns, and accidental bravery. When he falls through the trick step in Order of the Phoenix and loses the prophecy orb, it's easy to see it as failure. But that moment leads to a reconfiguration of the group's priorities. Mistakes are directional forces in Rowling's universe. They are not punishments, they are transformations. In Prisoner of Azkaban, the staircases serve another function as shields and tools of evasion. When Harry sneaks out under the invisibility cloak, it is the moving staircases that save him as much as the cloak. The building itself participates in the journey. It either aids or obstructs, not arbitrarily, but with quiet intelligence. Rowling's decision to make the architecture alive is not just for flair, it is a mirror of the characters' inner states. When they are lost emotionally, the staircases reflect that. When they are determined, the staircases, while still moving, become navigable. Sirius Black's presence in the school adds another layer. He slips through corridors that once held him as a student. The staircases that change direction now feel like remnants of a past he cannot return to. When Harry meets him in the Shrieking Shack, it is the culmination of twists, narrative, emotional, and physical. The school itself guides them there. Had a staircase not moved months earlier, would the chain of events have aligned in the same way? Probably not. The world Rowling creates is filled with small hinges that swing open giant doors. Even Draco Malfoy, the embodiment of pride and privilege, is not immune to this architectural metaphor. In Half-Blood Prince, his attempt to sneak Death Eaters into the castle via the Vanishing Cabinet is foiled by his inability to control what moves and what does not. The staircases are not his allies. They shift without warning, unbothered by power or planning. When chaos reigns during the Battle of Hogwarts, even Draco is a victim of unpredictability. He pleads for his life not with arrogance, but confusion. His path, once so straight, has collapsed under the weight of its assumptions. And there is Luna Lovegood, the one who perhaps understands the staircases best. She never questions them. When others grumble or panic, she simply steps where they lead. Her entire worldview is one of acceptance. When she walks beside Harry, she doesn't fear the detours, she welcomes them. Things we lose have a way of coming back to us in the end, she says, if not always in the way we expect. That, more than anything, is the voice of someone who has walked every moving staircase and never once asked why it turned. The room of requirement is the ultimate proof. It cannot be found unless you need it. It appears only through intent and emotion. But how do you get there? Often, it's a staircase that redirects you or a corridor that vanishes just in time. Rowling designed Hogwarts not as a fixed location, but a living organism that responds to purpose. The staircase does not mock the characters. It trains them. It weeds out the lazy, the rigid, the ones who fear the unknown. Only those who persist despite unpredictability find what they need. By the time of Deathly Hallows, even Harry has accepted this. As he returns to the school in the final book, he doesn't try to control its paths. He listens, he feels, he follows instinct. When he and the others use Aberforth's tunnel to enter, they bypass the staircases entirely but that doesn't mean the lesson is lost. They have already learned it. The fight that ensues is chaotic, unplanned, and full of loss. But it is also a culmination of every wrong turn that led them here. The staircases are especially poetic when we remember that the entire story is about children becoming adults. Maturity is not the acquisition of power, it is the ability to accept uncertainty, to move forward without knowing if the path will hold. Every book introduces a new twist, a new challenge that could not be foreseen. The staircases are the foreshadowing. They tell us from the first chapter, you won't go where you expect, but you will go where you need. One of the most emotional moments in the series comes not during a battle, but in Order of the Phoenix, when Harry stands in Dumbledore's office and learns about the prophecy. He is not angry at the information. He is angry that he did not know it sooner, and that his path has been manipulated. The staircases echo this. They never reveal their reasons, but the journey is always toward knowledge, even if it's painful. Neither can live while the other survives, the prophecy says. But before Harry can accept it, he must learn to walk the path, even when it vanishes beneath him. The moving staircases are also a defense mechanism. They confuse invaders, mislead enemies. In Deathly Hallows, when the Carrows try to control the school, it is implied that Hogwarts itself resists them. Staircases become harder to navigate. Rooms seal themselves. The castle chooses sides. It is alive, not in a cartoonish way, but in the way a soul is alive. When Snape flees, the staircases do not offer him shortcuts. When McGonagall prepares for battle, they align. In many ways, the staircases represent Rowling's entire narrative philosophy. She does not write in straight lines. The story is a maze. Characters shift, truths evolve, villains soften, heroes break. Each book is another flaw, and the staircases that bind them do not follow logic. They follow need. Readers, like students, must let go of expectations. They must jump the vanishing step, even if they fall the first time. Even after the war ends and Hogwarts begins to rebuild, the staircases remain. They are still unpredictable, still alive, because even in peace does not hold still. The survivors, Harry, Hermione, Neville, and others, have learned this. Their victory is not in controlling the path, but in enduring it. So the next time one reads about a staircase that changes direction, remember, it is not a prank. It is a prophecy. It is Rowling's subtle way of saying that nothing worth discovering comes without confusion, and that every wrong turn may in the end be the most important one of all.